A farmer had a horse that had been an excellent faithful servant to him, but he was now grown too old to work, so the farmer would give him nothing more to eat, and said, "I want you no longer, so take yourself off out of my stable. I shall not take you back again until you are stronger than a lion." Then he opened the door and turned him adrift. The poor horse was very melancholy, and wandered up and down in the wood, seeking some little shelter from the cold wind and rain. Presently, a fox met him. "What's the matter, my friend?" said he. "Why do you hang down your head and look so lonely and woebegone?" "Ah," replied the horse, "justice and avarice never dwell in one house. My master has forgotten all that I have done for him so many years, and because I can no longer work he has turned me adrift, and says unless I become stronger than a lion he will not take me back again. What chance can I have of that? He knows I have none, or he would not talk so." However, the fox bid him be of good cheer, and said, "I will help you. Lie down there, stretch yourself out quite stiff, and pretend to be dead." The horse did as he was told, and the fox went straight to the lion who lived in a cave close by, and said to him, a little way off lies a dead horse. Come with me and you may make an excellent meal of his carcass. The lion was greatly pleased, and set off immediately, and when they came to the horse, the fox said, "You will not be able to eat him comfortably here. I'll tell you what, I will tie you fast to his tail, and then you can draw him to your den, and eat him at your leisure." This advice pleased the lion, so he laid himself down quietly for the fox to make him fast to the horse. But the fox managed to tie his legs together and bound all so hard and fast that with all his strength he could not set himself free. When the work was done, the fox clapped the horse on the shoulder, and said, "Jip, Dobbin, Jip." Then up he sprang and moved off, dragging the lion behind him. The beast began to roar and bellow, till all the birds of the wood flew away for fright, but the horse let him sing on, and made his way quietly over the fields to his master's house. "Here he is, master," said he, "I have got the better of him." And when the farmer saw his old servant, his heart relented, and he said, "Thou shalt stay in thy stable and be well taken care of." And so the poor old horse had plenty to eat, and lived till he died. There was once upon a time a soldier who for many years had served the king faithfully, but when the war came to an end could serve no longer, because of the many wounds which he had received. The king said to him, "You may return to your home, I need you no longer, and you will not receive any more money, for he only receives wages who renders me service for them." Then the soldier did not know how to earn a living, went away greatly troubled, and walked the whole day, until in the evening he entered a forest. When darkness came on, he saw a light, which he went up to, and came to a house wherein lived a witch. "Do give me one night's lodging, and a little to eat and drink," said he to her, "or I shall starve." "Oh ho," she answered, "who gives anything to a runaway soldier? Yet will I be compassionate, and take you in, if you will do what I wish." "What do you wish?" said the soldier. "That you should dig all round my garden for me, tomorrow." The soldier consented, and next day labored with all his strength, but could not finish it by the evening. "I see well enough," said the witch, "that you can do no more today, but I will keep you yet another night, in payment for which you must tomorrow chop me a load of wood, and chop it small." The soldier spent the whole day in doing it, and in the evening the witch proposed that he should stay one night more. "Tomorrow, you shall only do me a very trifling piece of work. Behind my house, there is an old dry well, into which my light has fallen. It burns blue, and never goes out, and you shall bring it up again." Next day the old woman took him to the well, and let him down in a basket. He found the blue light, and made her a signal to draw him up again. She did draw him up, but when he came near the edge, she stretched down her hand and wanted to take the blue light away from him. "No," said he, perceiving her evil intention. "I will not give you the light until I am standing with both feet upon the ground." The witch fell into a passion, let him fall again into the well, and went away. The poor soldier fell without injury on the moist ground, and the blue light went on burning, but of what use was that to him? He saw very well that he could not escape death. He sat for a while very sorrowfully. Then suddenly he felt in his pocket and found his tobacco pipe, which was still half full. "This shall be my last pleasure," thought he. Pulled it out, lit it at the blue light and began to smoke. When the smoke had circled about the cavern, suddenly a little black dwarf stood before him, and said, "Lord, what are your commands?" "What my commands are," replied the soldier, quite astonished. "I must do everything you bid me," said the little man. "Good," said the soldier, "then in the first place help me out of this well." The little man took him by the hand, and led him through an underground passage, but he did not forget to take the blue light with him. On the way the dwarf showed him the treasures which the witch had collected and hidden there, and the soldier took as much gold as he could carry. When he was above, he said to the little man, "Now go and bind the old witch, and carry her before the judge." In a short time she came by like the wind, riding on a wild tomcat and screaming frightfully. Nor was it long before the little man reappeared. "It is all done," said he, "and the witch is already hanging on the gallows." "What further commands has my lord?" inquired the dwarf. At this moment, "None," answered the soldier, "you can return home, only be at hand immediately, if I summon you. Nothing more is needed then. That you should light your pipe at the blue light, and I will appear before you at once." Thereupon he vanished from his sight. The soldier returned to the town from which he came. He went to the best inn, ordered himself handsome clothes, and then bade the landlord furnish him a room as handsome as possible. When it was ready and the soldier had taken possession of it, he summoned the little black mannikin and said, "I have served the king faithfully, but he has dismissed me and left me to hunger, and now I want to take my revenge. What am I to do?" asked the little man. "Late at night, when the king's daughter is in bed, bring her here in her sleep, she shall do servant's work for me." The mannikin said, "That is an easy thing for me to do, but a very dangerous thing for you, for if it is discovered, you will fare ill." When 12 o'clock had struck, the door sprang open, and the mannikin carried in the princess. "Aha! Are you there?" cried the soldier. "Get to your work at once. Fetch the broom and sweep the chamber." When she had done this, he ordered her to come to his chair, and then he stretched out his feet and said, "Pull off my boots," and then he threw them in her face, and made her pick them up again, and clean and brighten them. She, however, did everything he bade her, without opposition, silently and with half-shut eyes. When the first cock crowed, the mannikin carried her back to the royal palace, and laid her in her bed. Next morning when the princess arose she went to her father, and told him that she had had a very strange dream. "I was carried through the streets with the rapidity of lightning," said she, "and taken into a soldier's room, and I had to wait upon him like a servant, sweep his room, clean his boots, and do all kinds of menial work. It was only a dream, and yet I am just as tired as if I really had done everything." "The dream may have been true," said the king. "I will give you a piece of advice. Fill your pocket full of peas, and make a small hole in the pocket, and then if you are carried away again, they will fall out and leave a track in the streets. But unseen by the king, the mannequin was standing beside him when he said that, and heard all. At night when the sleeping princess was again carried through the streets, some peas certainly did fall out of her pocket, but they made no track, for the crafty mannequin had just before scattered peas in every street there was. And again the princess was compelled to do servant's work until cockcrow. Next morning the king sent his people out to seek the track, but it was all in vain, for in every street poor children were sitting, picking up peas, and saying, "It must have rained peas last night. We must think of something else," said the king. "Keep your shoes on when you go to bed, and before you come back from the place where you were taken, hide one of them there. I will soon contrive to find it." The black mannequin heard this plot, and at night when the soldier again ordered him to bring the princess, revealed it to him, and told him that he knew of no expedient to counteract this stratagem, and that if the shoe were found in the soldier's house it would go badly with him. "Do what I bid you," replied the soldier, and again this third night the princess was obliged to work like a servant, but before she went away, she hid her shoe under the bed. Next morning the king had the entire town searched for his daughter's shoe. It was found at the soldier's, and the soldier himself, who at the entreaty of the dwarf had gone outside the gate, was soon brought back and thrown into prison. In his flight he had forgotten the most valuable things he had, the blue light and the gold, and had only 1 ducat in his pocket. And now loaded with chains, he was standing at the window of his dungeon, when he chanced to see one of his comrades passing by. The soldier tapped at the pane of glass, and when this man came up, said to him, "Be so kind as to fetch me the small bundle I have left lying in the inn, and I will give you a ducat for doing it." His comrade ran thither and brought him what he wanted. As soon as the soldier was alone again, he lighted his pipe and summoned the black mannequin. "Have no fear," said the latter to his master. "Go wheresoever they take you, and let them do what they will, only take the blue light with you." Next day the soldier was tried, and though he had done nothing wicked, the judge condemned him to death. When he was led forth to die, he begged a last favor of the king. "What is it?" asked the king. "That I may smoke one more pipe on my way." "You may smoke 3, answered the king, "but do not imagine that I will spare your life." Then the soldier pulled out his pipe and lighted it at the blue light, and as soon as a few wreaths of smoke had ascended, the mannequin was there with a small cudgel in his hand, and said, "What does my lord command?" "Strike down to earth that false judge there, and his constable, and spare not the king who has treated me so ill." Then the mannequin fell on them like lightning, darting this way and that way, and whosoever was so much as touched by his cudgel fell to earth, and did not venture to stir again. The king was terrified. He threw himself on the soldier's mercy, and merely to be allowed to live at all, gave him his kingdom for his own, and his daughter to wife. The Raven. There was once a queen who had a little daughter, still too young to run alone. One day the child was very troublesome, and the mother could not quiet it, do what she would. She grew impatient, and seeing the ravens flying round the castle, she opened the window, and said, "I wish you were a raven and would fly away, then I should have a little peace." Scarcely were the words out of her mouth, when the child in her arms was turned into a raven, and flew away from her through the open window. The bird took its flight to a dark wood and remained there for a long time. And meanwhile the parents could hear nothing of their child. Long after this, a man was making his way through the wood when he heard a raven calling, and he followed the sound of the voice. As he drew Near, the raven said, I am by birth a king's daughter, but am now under the spell of some enchantment. You can, however, set me free. What am I to do? He asked. She replied, Go farther into the wood until you come to a house, wherein lives an old woman. She will offer you food and drink, but you must not take of either. If you do, you will fall into a deep sleep, and will not be able to help me. In the garden behind the house is a large tan heap, and on that you must stand and watch for me. I shall drive there in my carriage at 2 o'clock in the afternoon for 3 successive days. The first day it will be drawn by 4 white, the second by 4 chestnut, and the last by 4 black horses. But if you fail to keep awake and I find you sleeping, I shall not be set free. The man promised to do all that she wished, but the raven said, Alas! I know even now that you will take something from the woman and be unable to save me. The man assured her again that he would on no account touch a thing to eat or drink. When he came to the house and went inside, the old woman met him, and said, Poor man! How tired you are! Come in and rest and let me give you something to eat and drink. No, answered the man, I will neither eat nor drink. But she would not leave him alone, and urged him saying, If you will not eat anything, at least you might take a draught of wine. 1 drink counts for nothing, and at last he allowed himself to be persuaded, and drank. As it drew towards the appointed hour, he went outside into the garden and mounted the tan heap to await the raven. Suddenly a feeling of fatigue came over him, and unable to resist it, he lay down for a little while, fully determined, however, to keep awake. But in another minute his eyes closed of their own accord, and he fell into such a deep sleep that all the noises in the world would not have awakened him. At 2 o'clock the raven came driving along, drawn by her 4 white horses. But even before she reached the spot, she said to herself, sighing, I know he has fallen asleep. When she entered the garden, there she found him as she had feared, lying on the tan heap, fast asleep. She got out of her carriage and went to him. She called him and shook him, but it was all in vain. He still continued sleeping. The next day at noon, the old woman came to him again with food and drink which he at first refused. At last, overcome by her persistent entreaties that he would take something, he lifted the glass and drank again. Towards 2 o'clock he went into the garden and on to the tan heap to watch for the raven. He had not been there long before he began to feel so tired that his limbs seemed hardly able to support him, and he could not stand upright any longer, so again he lay down and fell fast asleep. As the raven drove along her 4 chestnut horses, she said sorrowfully to herself, I know he has fallen asleep. She went as before to look for him, but he slept, and it was impossible to awaken him. The following day the old woman said to him, What is this? You are not eating or drinking anything. Do you want to kill yourself? He answered, I may not and will not either eat or drink. But she put down the dish of food and the glass of wine in front of him. And when he smelt the wine, he was unable to resist the temptation, and took a deep draught. When the hour came round again he went as usual on to the tan heap in the garden to await the king's daughter, but he felt even more overcome with weariness than on the 2 previous days, and throwing himself down, he slept like a log. At 2 o'clock the raven could be seen approaching. And this time her coachman and everything about her, as well as her horses, were black. She was sadder than ever as she drove along, and said mournfully, I know he has fallen asleep, and will not be able to set me free. She found him sleeping heavily, and all her efforts to awaken him were of no avail. Then she placed beside him a loaf, and some meat, and a flask of wine, of such a kind, that however much he took of them, they would never grow less. After that she drew a gold ring, on which her name was engraved off her finger, and put it upon one of his. Finally, she laid a letter near him in which, after giving him particulars of the food and drink she had left for him, she finished with the following words. I see that as long as you remain here you will never be able to set me free. If, however, you still wish to do so, come to the golden castle of Stromberg. This is well within your power to accomplish. She then returned to her carriage and drove to the golden castle of Stromberg. When the man awoke and found that he had been sleeping, he was grieved at heart, and said, she has no doubt been here and driven away again. And it is now too late for me to save her. Then his eyes fell on the things which were lying beside him. He read the letter, and knew from it all that had happened. He rose up without delay, eager to start on his way and to reach the castle of Stromberg, but he had no idea in which direction he ought to go. He traveled about a long time in search of it, and came at last to a dark forest, through which he went on walking for 14 days and still could not find a way out. Once more the night came on, and worn out he lay down under a bush and fell asleep again. The next day he pursued his way through the forest, and that evening, thinking to rest again, he lay down as before, but he heard such a howling and wailing that he found it impossible to sleep. He waited till it was darker and people had begun to light up their houses, and then, seeing a little glimmer ahead of him, he went towards it. He found that the light came from a house which looked smaller than it really was, from the contrast of its height with that of an immense giant who stood in front of it. He thought to himself, if the giant sees me going in, my life will not be worth much. However, after a while he summoned up courage and went forward. When the giant saw him, he called out, it is lucky for that you have come, for I have not had anything to eat for a long time. I can have you now for my supper. I would rather you let that alone, said the man, for I do not willingly give myself up to be eaten. If you are wanting food I have enough to satisfy your hunger. If that is so, replied the giant, I will leave you in peace. I only thought of eating you because I had nothing else. So they went indoors together and sat down, and the man brought out the bread, meat, and wine, which although he had eaten and drunk of them, were still unconsumed. The giant was pleased with the good cheer, and ate and drank to his heart's content. When he had finished his supper, the man asked him if he could direct him to the castle of Stromberg. The giant said, I will look on my map, on it are marked all the towns, villages, and houses. So he fetched his map, and looked for the castle, but could not find it. Never mind, he said, I have larger maps upstairs in the cupboard, we will look on those. But they searched in vain, for the castle was not marked even on these. The man now thought he should like to continue his journey, but the giant begged him to remain for a day or two longer until the return of his brother, who was away in search of provisions. When the brother came home, they asked him about the castle of Stromberg, and he told them he would look on his own maps as soon as he had eaten and appeased his hunger. Accordingly, when he had finished his supper, they all went up together to his room and looked through his maps, but the castle was not to be found. Then he fetched other older maps, and they went on looking for the castle until at last they found it, but it was many thousand miles away. How shall I be able to get there? Asked the man. I have 2 hours to spare, said the giant, and I will carry you into the neighborhood of the castle. I must then return to look after the child who is in our care. The giant, thereupon, carried the man to within about 100 leagues of the castle, where he left him, saying, you will be able to walk the remainder of the way yourself. The man journeyed on day and night, till he reached the golden castle of Stromberg. He found it situated, however, on a glass mountain, and looking up from the foot he saw the Enchanted maiden drive round her castle and then go inside. He was overjoyed to see her, and longed to get to the top of the mountain, but the sides were so slippery that every time he attempted to climb he fell back again. When he saw that it was impossible to reach her, he was greatly grieved, and said to himself, I will remain here and wait for her. So he built himself a little hut, and there he sat and watched for a whole year, and every day he saw the king's daughter driving round her castle, but still was unable to get nearer to her. Looking out from his hut one day he saw 3 robbers fighting, and he called out to them, God be with you. They stopped when they heard the call, but looking round and seeing nobody, they went on again with their fighting, which now became more furious. God be with you, he cried. Again, and again they paused and looked about, but seeing no one went back to their fighting. A third time he called out, God be with you. And then thinking he should like to know the cause of dispute between the 3 men, he went out and asked them why they were fighting so angrily with one another. One of them said that he had found a stick, and that he had but to strike it against any door through which he wished to pass, and it immediately flew open. Another told him that he had found a cloak which rendered its wearer invisible, and the third had caught a horse which would carry its rider over any obstacle, and even up the glass mountain. They had been unable to decide whether they would keep together and have the things in common, or whether they would separate. On hearing this, the man said, I will give you something in exchange for those 3 things, not money, for that I have not got, but something that is of far more value. I must first, however, prove whether all you have told me about your 3 things is true. The robbers, therefore, made him get on the horse, and handed him the stick and the cloak, and when he had put this round him he was no longer visible. Then he fell upon them with the stick and beat them one after another, crying, There, you idle vagabonds, you have got what you deserve. Are you satisfied now? After this he rode up the glass mountain. When he reached the gate of the castle, he found it closed, but he gave it a blow with his stick, and it flew wide open at once, and he passed through. He mounted the steps and entered the room where the maiden was sitting, with a golden goblet full of wine in front of her. She could not see him, for he still wore his cloak. He took the ring which she had given him off his finger, and threw it into the goblet, so that it rang as it touched the bottom. That is my own ring, she exclaimed, and if that is so the man must also be here who is coming to set me free. She sought for him about the castle, but could find him nowhere. Meanwhile he had gone outside again and mounted his horse and thrown off the cloak. When therefore she came to the castle gate she saw him, and cried aloud for joy. Then he dismounted and took her in his arms, and she kissed him, and said, Now you have indeed set me free, and tomorrow we will celebrate our marriage. There was a man who had 3 sons, the youngest of whom was called Dummling, and was despised, mocked, and sneered at on every occasion. Simpleton. It happened that the eldest wanted to go into the forest to Hew wood. And before he went his mother gave him a beautiful sweet cake and a bottle of wine in order that he might not suffer from hunger or thirst. When he entered the forest he met a little grey-haired old man who bade him good day, and said, Do give me a piece of cake out of your pocket, and let me have a draught of your wine, I am so hungry and thirsty. But the clever son answered, If I give you my cake and wine, I shall have none for myself, be off with you, and he left the little man standing, and went on. But when he began to hew down a tree, it was not long before he made a false stroke, and the axe cut him in the arm, so that he had to go home and have it bound up. And this was the little grey man's doing. After this the second son went into the forest, and his mother gave him, like the eldest, a cake and a bottle of wine. The little old grey man met him likewise, and asked him for a piece of cake and a drink of wine. But the second son, too, said sensibly enough, "What I give you will be taken away from myself, be off," and he left the little man standing and went on. His punishment, however, was not delayed. When he had made a few blows at the tree, he struck himself in the leg, so that he had to be carried home. Then Dummling said, "Father, do let me go and cut wood." The father answered, "Your brothers have hurt themselves with it, leave it alone. You do not understand anything about it." But Dummling begged so long that at last he said, "Just go then, you will get wiser by hurting yourself." His mother gave him a cake made with water and baked in the cinders, and with it a bottle of sour beer. When he came to the forest, the little old grey man met him likewise, and greeting him, said, "Give me a piece of your cake and a drink out of your bottle, I am so hungry and thirsty." Dummling answered, "I have only cinder cake and sour beer. If that pleases you, we will sit down and eat." So they sat down, and when Dummling pulled out his cinder cake, it was a fine sweet cake, and the sour beer had become good wine. So they ate and drank, and after that the little man said, "Since you have a good heart, and are willing to divide what you have, I will give you good luck. There stands an old tree, cut it down, and you will find something at the roots." Then the little man took leave of him. Dummling went and cut down the tree, and when it fell there was a goose sitting in the roots with feathers of pure gold. He lifted her up, and, taking her with him, went to an inn where he thought he would stay the night. Now the host had 3 daughters, who saw the goose and were curious to know what such a wonderful bird might be, and would have liked to have one of its golden feathers. The eldest thought, "I shall soon find an opportunity of pulling out a feather," and as soon as Dummling had gone out she seized the goose by the wing, but her finger and hand remained sticking fast to it. The second came soon afterwards, thinking only of how she might get a feather for herself, but she had scarcely touched her sister than she was held fast. At last the third also came with the like intent, and the others screamed out, "Keep away, for goodness' sake keep away." But she did not understand why she was to keep away. "The others are there," she thought, "I may as well be there too," and ran to them, but as soon as she had touched her sister, she remained sticking fast to her. So they had to spend the night with the goose. The next morning Dummling took the goose under his arm and set out, without troubling himself about the 3 girls who were hanging on to it. They were obliged to run after him continually, now left, now right, wherever his legs took him. In the middle of the fields the parson met them, and when he saw the procession he said, "For shame, you good-for-nothing girls, why are you running across the fields after this young man? Is that seemly?" At the same time he seized the youngest by the hand in order to pull her away. But as soon as he touched her he likewise stuck fast, and was himself obliged to run behind. Before long the sexton came by and saw his master, the parson, running behind 3 girls. He was astonished at this and called out, "Hi, your reverence, whither away so quickly? Do not forget that we have a christening today," and running after him he took him by the sleeve, but was also held fast to it. Whilst the 5 were trotting thus one behind the other, 2 labourers came with their hoes from the fields. The parson called out to them and begged that they would set him and the sexton free. But they had scarcely touched the sexton when they were held fast, and now there were 7 of them running behind Dummling and the goose. Soon afterwards he came to a city, where a king ruled who had a daughter who was so serious that no one could make her laugh. So he had put forth a decree that whosoever should be able to make her laugh should marry her. When Dummling heard this, he went with his goose and all her train before the king's daughter, and as soon as she saw the 7 people Running on, one behind the other, she began to laugh quite loudly, and as if she would never stop. Thereupon Dummling asked to have her for his wife, but the king did not like the son-in-law, and made all manner of excuses and said he must first produce a man who could drink a cellar full of wine. Dummling thought of the little grey man, who could certainly help him, so he went into the forest, and in the same place where he had felled the tree, he saw a man sitting, who had a very sorrowful face. Dummling asked him what he was taking to heart so sorely, and he answered, I have such a great thirst and cannot quench it, cold water I cannot stand, a barrel of wine I have just emptied, but that to me is like a drop on a hot stone. There, I can help you, said Dummling, just come with me and you shall be satisfied. He led him into the king's cellar, and the man bent over the huge barrels, and drank till his loins hurt, and before the day was out he had emptied all the barrels. Then Dummling asked once more for his bride, but the king was vexed that such an ugly fellow, whom everyone called Dummling, should take away his daughter, and he made a new condition: he must first find a man who could eat a whole mountain of bread. Dummling did not think long, but went straight into the forest, where in the same place there sat a man who was tying up his body with a strap, and making an awful face, and saying, I have eaten a whole ovenful of rolls, but what good is that when one has such a hunger as I? My stomach remains empty, and I must tie myself up if I am not to die of hunger. At this Dummling was glad, and said, Get up and come with me, you shall eat yourself full. He led him to the king's palace where all the flour in the whole kingdom was collected, and from it he caused a huge mountain of bread to be baked. The man from the forest stood before it, began to eat, and by the end of one day the whole mountain had vanished. Then Dummling for the third time asked for his bride, but the king again sought a way out, and ordered a ship which could sail on land and on water. As soon as you come sailing back in it, said he, you shall have my daughter for wife. Dummling went straight into the forest, and there sat the little grey man to whom he had given his cake. When he heard what Dummling wanted, he said, Since you have given me to eat and to drink, I will give you the ship, and I do all this because you once were kind to me. Then he gave him the ship which could sail on land and water, and when the king saw that, he could no longer prevent him from having his daughter. The wedding was celebrated, and after the king's death, Dummling inherited his kingdom and lived for a long time contentedly with his wife. Long before you or I were born, there reigned, in a country a great way off, a king who had 3 sons. This king once fell very ill, so ill that nobody thought he could live. His sons were very much grieved at their father's sickness, and as they were walking together very mournfully in the garden of the palace, a little old man met them and asked what was the matter. They told him that their father was very ill, and that they were afraid nothing could save him. I know what would, said the little old man, it is the water of life. If he could have a draught of it he would be well again, but it is very hard to get. Then the eldest son said, I will soon find it, and he went to the sick king, and begged that he might go in search of the water of life, as it was the only thing that could save him. No, said the king. I had rather die than place you in such great danger as you must meet within your journey. But he begged so hard that the king let him go, and the prince thought to himself, if I bring my father this water, he will make me sole heir to his kingdom. Then he set out, and when he had gone on his way some time he came to a deep valley, overhung with rocks and woods, and as he looked around, he saw standing above him on one of the rocks a little ugly dwarf, with a sugarloaf cap and a scarlet cloak, and the dwarf called to him and said, Prince, whither so fast? "What is that to thee, you ugly imp?" said the prince haughtily, and rode on. But the dwarf was enraged at his behavior, and laid a fairy spell of ill luck upon him, so that as he rode on the mountain pass became narrower and narrower, and at last the way was so straitened that he could not go to step forward, and when he thought to have turned his horse round and go back the way he came, he heard a loud laugh ringing round him, and found that the path was closed behind him, so that he was shut in all round. He next tried to get off his horse and make his way on foot, but again the laugh rang in his ears, and he found himself unable to move a step, and thus he was forced to abide spellbound. Meantime the old king was lingering on in daily hope of his son's return, till at last the second son said, "Father, I will go in search of the water of life." For he thought to himself, "My brother is surely dead, and the kingdom will fall to me if I find the water." The king was at first very unwilling to let him go, but at last yielded to his wish. So he set out and followed the same road which his brother had done, and met with the same elf, who stopped him at the same spot in the mountains, saying, as before, "Prince, prince, whither so fast? Mind your own affairs, busybody," said the prince scornfully, and rode on. But the dwarf put the same spell upon him as he put on his elder brother, and he, too, was at last obliged to take up his abode in the heart of the mountains. Thus it is with proud silly people, who think themselves above everyone else, and are too proud to ask or take advice. When the second prince had thus been gone a long time, the youngest son said he would go and search for the water of life, and trusted he should soon be able to make his father well again. So he set out, and the dwarf met him too at the same spot in the valley, among the mountains, and said, "Prince, whither so fast?" And the prince said, "I am going in search of the water of life, because my father is ill, and like to die. Can you help me? Pray be kind, and aid me if you can." "Do you know where it is to be found?" asked the dwarf. "No," said the prince, "I do not." "Pray tell me if you know. Then as you have spoken to me kindly, and are wise enough to seek for advice, I will tell you how and where to go. The water you seek springs from a well in an enchanted castle, and that you may be able to reach it in safety, I will give you an iron wand and 2 little loaves of bread. Strike the iron door of the castle 3 times with the wand, and it will open. 2 hungry lions will be lying down inside gaping for their prey, but if you throw them the bread they will let you pass. Then hasten on to the well, and take some of the water of life before the clock strikes 12, for if you tarry longer, the door will shut upon you forever." Then the prince thanked his little friend with the scarlet cloak for his friendly aid, and took the wand and the bread, and went traveling on and on, over sea and over land, till he came to his journey's end, and found everything to be as the dwarf had told him. The door flew open at the 3rd stroke of the wand, and when the lions were quieted he went on through the castle and came at length to a beautiful hall. Around it he saw several knights sitting in a trance. Then he pulled off their rings and put them on his own fingers. In another room he saw on a table a sword and a loaf of bread, which he also took. Further on he came to a room where a beautiful young lady sat upon a couch, and she welcomed him joyfully, and said if he would set her free from the spell that bound her, the kingdom should be his, if he would come back in a year and marry her. Then she told him that the well that held the water of life was in the palace gardens, and bade him make haste and draw what he wanted before the clock struck 12. He walked on, and as he walked through beautiful gardens he came to a delightful shady spot in which stood a couch, and he thought to himself, as he felt tired, that he would rest himself for a while and gaze on the lovely scenes around him. So he laid himself down, and sleep fell upon him unawares, so that he did not wake up till the clock was striking 11:45. Then he sprang from the couch dreadfully frightened, ran to the well, filled a cup that was standing by him full of water, and hastened to get away in time. Just as he was going out of the iron door it struck 12, and the door fell so quickly upon him that it snapped off a piece of his heel. When he found himself safe, he was overjoyed to think that he had got the water of life, and as he was going on his way homewards, he passed by the little dwarf, who, when he saw the sword and the loaf, said, "You have made a noble prize, with the sword you can at a blow slay whole armies, and the bread will never fail you." Then the prince thought to himself, "I cannot go home to my father without my brothers," so he said, "My dear friend, cannot you tell me where my 2 brothers are, who set out in search of the water of life before me, and never came back?" "I have shut them up by a charm between 2 mountains," said the dwarf, "because they were proud and ill-behaved, and scorned to ask advice." The prince begged so hard for his brothers, that the dwarf at last set them free, though unwillingly, saying, "Beware of them, for they have bad hearts." Their brother, however, was greatly rejoiced to see them, and told them all that had happened to him, how he had found the water of life, and had taken a cup full of it, and how he had set a beautiful princess free from a spell that bound her, and how she had engaged to wait a whole year, and then to marry him, and to give him the kingdom. Then they all 3 rode on together, and on their way home came to a country that was laid waste by war and a dreadful famine, so that it was feared all must die for want. But the prince gave the king of the land the bread, and all his kingdom ate of it. And he lent the king the wonderful sword, and he slew the enemy's army with it, and thus the kingdom was once more in peace and plenty. In the same manner he befriended 2 other countries through which they passed on their way. When they came to the sea, they got into a ship, and during their voyage the 2 eldest said to themselves, "Our brother has got the water which we could not find, therefore our father will forsake us and give him the kingdom, which is our right." So they were full of envy and revenge, and agreed together how they could ruin him. Then they waited till he was fast asleep, and poured the water of life out of the cup, and took it for themselves, giving him bitter sea water instead. When they came to their journey's end, the youngest son brought his cup to the sick king, that he might drink and be healed. Scarcely, however, had he tasted the bitter sea water when he became worse even than he was before, and then both the elder sons came in, and blamed the youngest for what they had done, and said that he wanted to poison their father, but that they had found the water of life, and had brought it with them. He no sooner began to drink of what they brought him, than he felt his sickness leave him, and was as strong and well as in his younger days. Then they went to their brother, and laughed at him, and said, "Well, brother, you found the water of life, did you? You have had the trouble, and we shall have the reward. Pray, with all your cleverness, why did not you manage to keep your eyes open? Next year one of us will take away your beautiful princess, if you do not take care. You had better say nothing about this to our father, for he does not believe a word you say, and if you tell tales, you shall lose your life into the bargain. But be quiet, and we will let you off." The old king was still very angry with his youngest son, and thought that he really meant to have taken away his life, so he called his court together, and asked what should be done, and all agreed that he ought to be put to death. The prince knew nothing of what was going on, till one day, when the king's chief huntsman went a-hunting with him, and they were alone in the wood together. The huntsman looked so sorrowful that the prince said, "My friend, what is the matter with you?" "I cannot and dare not tell you," said he. But the prince begged very hard, and said, "Only tell me what it is, and do not think I shall be angry, for I will forgive you." "Alas," said the huntsman, "the king has ordered me to shoot you." The prince started at this, and said, "Let me live, and I Will change dresses with you, you shall take my royal coat to show to my father, and do you give me your shabby one? With all my heart, said the huntsman, I am sure I shall be glad to save you, for I could not have shot you. Then he took the prince's coat, and gave him the shabby one, and went away through the wood. Some time after, 3 grand embassies came to the old king's court, with rich gifts of gold and precious stones for his youngest son. Now all these were sent from the 3 kings to whom he had lent his sword and loaf of bread, in order to rid them of their enemy and feed their people. This touched the old king's heart, and he thought his son might still be guiltless, and said to his court, "Oh, that my son were still alive! How it grieves me that I had him killed." "He is still alive," said the huntsman, "and I am glad that I had pity on him, but let him go in peace," and brought home his royal coat. At this the king was overwhelmed with joy, and made it known throughout all his kingdom, that if his son would come back to his court he would forgive him. Meanwhile the princess was eagerly waiting till her deliverer should come back, and had a road made leading up to her palace all of shining gold, and told her courtiers that whoever came on horseback, and rode straight up to the gate upon it, was her true lover, and that they must let him in, but whoever rode on one side of it, they must be sure was not the right one, and that they must send him away at once. The time soon came, when the eldest brother thought that he would make haste to go to the princess, and say that he was the one who had set her free, and that he should have her for his wife, and the kingdom with her. As he came before the palace and saw the golden road, he stopped to look at it, and he thought to himself, "It is a pity to ride upon this beautiful road," so he turned aside and rode on the right-hand side of it. But when he came to the gate, the guards, who had seen the road he took, said to him, he could not be what he said he was, and must go about his business. The second prince set out soon afterwards on the same errand, and when he came to the golden road, and his horse had set one foot upon it, he stopped to look at it, and thought it very beautiful, and said to himself, "What a pity it is that anything should tread here." Then he too turned aside and rode on the left side of it. But when he came to the gate, the guards said he was not the true prince, and that he too must go away about his business, and away he went. Now when the full year was come round, the third brother left the forest in which he had lain hid for fear of his father's anger, and set out in search of his betrothed bride. So he journeyed on, thinking of her all the way, and rode so quickly that he did not even see what the road was made of, but went with his horse straight over it, and as he came to the gate it flew open, and the princess welcomed him with joy, and said he was her deliverer, and should now be her husband and lord of the kingdom. When the first joy at their meeting was over, the princess told him she had heard of his father having forgiven him, and of his wish to have him home again, so, before his wedding with the princess, he went to visit his father, taking her with him. Then he told him everything, how his brothers had cheated and robbed him, and yet that he had borne all those wrongs for the love of his father. And the old king was very angry, and wanted to punish his wicked sons, but they made their escape, and got into a ship and sailed away over the wide sea, and where they went to nobody knew and nobody cared. And now the old king gathered together his court, and asked all his kingdom to come and celebrate the wedding of his son and the princess. And young and old, noble and squire, gentle and simple, came at once on the summons, and among the rest came the friendly dwarf, with the sugarloaf hat, and a new scarlet cloak. And the wedding was held, and the merry bells rung. And all the good people they danced and they sung, and feasted and frolicked I can't tell how long. There was once a king's son who had a bride whom he loved very much. And when he was sitting beside her and very happy, news came that his father lay sick unto death, and desired to see him once again before his end. Then he said to his beloved, I must now go and leave you, I give you a ring as a remembrance of me. When I am king, I will return and fetch you. So he rode away, and when he reached his father, the latter was dangerously ill, and near his death. He said to him, Dear son, I wished to see you once again before my end, promise me to marry as I wish, and he named a certain king's daughter who was to be his wife. The son was in such trouble that he did not think what he was doing, and said, Yes, dear father, your will shall be done, and thereupon the king shut his eyes, and died. When therefore the son had been proclaimed king, and the time of mourning was over, he was forced to keep the promise which he had given his father, and caused the king's daughter to be asked in marriage, and she was promised to him. His first betrothed heard of this, and fretted so much about his faithfulness that she nearly died. Then her father said to her, Dearest child, why are you so sad? You shall have whatsoever you will. She thought for a moment and said, Dear father, I wish for 11 girls exactly like myself in face, figure, and size. The father said, If it be possible, your desire shall be fulfilled. And he caused a search to be made in his whole kingdom until 11 young maidens were found who exactly resembled his daughter in face, figure, and size. When they came to the king's daughter, she had 12 suits of huntsmen's clothes made, all alike, and the 11 maidens had to put on the huntsman's clothes, and she herself put on the 12th suit. Thereupon she took her leave of her father, and rode away with them, and rode to the court of her former betrothed, whom she loved so dearly. Then she asked if he required any huntsmen, and if he would take all of them into his service. The king looked at her and did not know her, but as they were such handsome fellows, he said, Yes, and that he would willingly take them, and now they were the king's 12 huntsmen. The king, however, had a lion which was a wondrous animal, for he knew all concealed and secret things. It came to pass that one evening he said to the king, You think you have 12 huntsmen? Yes, said the king, they are 12 huntsmen. The lion continued, You are mistaken. They are 12 girls. The king said, That cannot be true. How will you prove that to me? Oh, just let some peas be strewn in the antechamber, answered the lion, and then you will soon see. Men have a firm step, and when they walk over peas none of them stir, but girls trip and skip, and drag their feet, and the peas roll about. The king was well pleased with the counsel, and caused the peas to be strewn. There was, however, a servant of the king's who favored the huntsmen. And when he heard that they were going to be put to this test, he went to them and repeated everything, and said, The lion wants to make the king believe that you are girls. Then the king's daughter thanked him, and said to her maidens, Show some strength, and step firmly on the peas. So next morning when the king had the 12 huntsmen called before him, and they came into the antechamber where the peas were lying, they stepped so firmly on them, and had such a strong, sure walk, that not one of the peas either rolled or stirred. Then they went away again. And the king said to the lion, You have lied to me, they walk just like men. The lion said, They have been informed that they were going to be put to the test, and have assumed some strength. Just let 12 spinning wheels be brought into the antechamber, and they will go to them and be pleased with them, and that is what no man would do. The king liked the advice, and had the spinning wheels placed in the antechamber. But the servant, who was well disposed to the huntsmen, went to them and disclosed the project. So when they were alone, the king's daughter said to her 11 girls, Show some constraint, and do not look round at the spinning wheels. And next morning when the king had his 12 huntsmen summoned, they went through the antechamber, and never once looked at the spinning wheels. Then the king again said to the lion, You have deceived me, they are men, for they have not looked at the spinning wheels. The lion replied, they have restrained themselves. The king, however, would no longer believe the lion. The 12 huntsmen always followed the king to the chase, and his liking for them continually increased. Now it came to pass that once when they were out hunting, news came that the king's bride was approaching. When the true bride heard that, it hurt her so much that her heart was almost broken, and she fell fainting to the ground. The king thought something had happened to his dear huntsman, ran up to him, wanted to help him, and drew his glove off. Then he saw the ring which he had given to his first bride, and when he looked in her face he recognized her. Then his heart was so touched that he kissed her, and when she opened her eyes he said, you are mine, and I am yours, and no one in the world can alter that. He sent a messenger to the other bride, and entreated her to return to her own kingdom, for he had a wife already, and someone who had just found an old key did not require a new one. Thereupon the wedding was celebrated, and the lion was again taken into favor, because, after all, he had told the truth. There was once a merchant who had only one child, a son, that was very young, and barely able to run alone. He had 2 richly laden ships then, making a voyage upon the seas, in which he had embarked all his wealth, in the hope of making great gains, when the news came that both were lost. Thus from being a rich man he became all at once so very poor that nothing was left to him but one small plot of land, and there he often went in an evening to take his walk, and ease his mind of a little of his trouble. One day, as he was roaming along in a brown study, thinking with no great comfort on what he had been and what he now was, and was like to be, all on a sudden there stood before him a little, rough-looking black dwarf. Prithee, friend, why so sorrowful? Said he to the merchant, what is it you take so deeply to heart? If you would do me any good I would willingly tell you, said the merchant. Who knows but I may, said the little man, tell me what ails you, and perhaps you will find I may be of some use. Then the merchant told him how all his wealth was gone to the bottom of the sea, and how he had nothing left but that little plot of land. Oh, trouble not yourself about that, said the dwarf, only undertake to bring me here, 12 years hence. Whatever meets you first on your going home, and I will give you as much as you please. The merchant thought this was no great thing to ask, that it would most likely be his dog or his cat, or something of that sort, but forgot his little boy Heinel, so he agreed to the bargain, and signed and sealed the bond to do what was asked of him. But as he drew near home, his little boy was so glad to see him that he crept behind him, and laid fast hold of his legs, and looked up in his face and laughed. Then the father started, trembling with fear and horror, and saw what it was that he had bound himself to do, but as no gold was come, he made himself easy by thinking that it was only a joke, that the dwarf was playing him, and that, at any rate, when the money came, he should see the bearer, and would not take it in. About a month afterwards he went upstairs into a lumber room to look for some old iron, that he might sell it and raise a little money, and there, instead of his iron, he saw a large pile of gold lying on the floor. At the sight of this he was overjoyed, and forgetting all about his son, went into trade again, and became a richer merchant than before. Meantime little Heinel grew up, and as the end of the 12 years drew near, the merchant began to call to mind his bond, and became very sad and thoughtful, so that care and sorrow were written upon his face. The boy one day asked what was the matter, but his father would not tell for some time. At last, however, he said that he had, without knowing it, sold him for gold to a little, ugly-looking, black dwarf, and that the 12 years were coming round when he must keep his word. Then Heinel said, Father, give yourself very little trouble about that, I shall be too much for the little man. When the time came, the father and son went out together to the place agreed upon, and the son drew a circle on the ground, and set himself and his father in the middle of it. The little black dwarf soon came and walked round and round about the circle, but could not find any way to get into it, and he either could not, or dared not, jump over it. At last the boy said to him, "Have you anything to say to us, my friend, or what do you want?" Now Heinel had found a friend in a good fairy, that was fond of him, and had told him what to do, for this fairy knew what good luck was in store for him. "Have you brought me what you said you would?" said the dwarf to the merchant. The old man held his tongue, but Heinel said again, "What do you want here?" The dwarf said, "I come to talk with your father, not with you. You have cheated and taken in my father," said the son, "pray give him up his bond at once." "Fair and softly," said the little old man, "right is right, I have paid my money. And your father has had it, and spent it, so be so good as to let me have what I paid it for." "You must have my consent to that first," said Heinel, "so please to step in here, and let us talk it over." The old man grinned, and showed his teeth, as if he should have been very glad to get into the circle if he could. Then at last, after a long talk, they came to terms. Heinel agreed that his father must give him up, and that so far the dwarf should have his way, but, on the other hand, the fairy had told Heinel what fortune was in store for him, if he followed his own course, and he did not choose to be given up to his humpbacked friend, who seemed so anxious for his company. So, to make a sort of drawn battle of the matter, it was settled that Heinel should be put into an open boat, that lay on the seashore hard by, that the father should push him off with his own hand, and that he should thus be set adrift, and left to the bad or good luck of wind and weather. Then he took leave of his father, and set himself in the boat. But before it got far off a wave struck it, and it fell with one side low in the water, so the merchant thought that poor Heinel was lost, and went home very sorrowful, while the dwarf went his way, thinking that at any rate he had had his revenge. The boat, however, did not sink, for the good fairy took care of her friend, and soon raised the boat up again, and it went safely on. The young man sat safe within, till at length it ran ashore upon an unknown land. As he jumped upon the shore he saw before him a beautiful castle, but empty and dreary within, for it was enchanted. "Here," said he to himself, "must I find the prize the good fairy told me of." So he once more searched the whole palace through, till at last he found a white snake, lying coiled up on a cushion in one of the chambers. Now the white snake was an enchanted princess, and she was very glad to see him, and said, "Are you at last come to set me free? 12 long years have I waited here for the fairy to bring you hither as she promised, for you alone can save me. This night 12 men will come. Their faces will be black, and they will be dressed in chain armor. They will ask what you do here, but give no answer, and let them do what they will: beat, whip, pinch, prick, or torment you, bear all, only speak not a word, and at 12 o'clock they must go away. The second night 12 others will come, and the third night 24, who will even cut off your head, but at the 12th hour of that night their power is gone, and I shall be free, and will come and bring you the water of life, and will wash you with it, and bring you back to life and health." And all came to pass as she had said. Heinel bore all, and spoke not a word, and the third night the princess came and fell on his neck and kissed him. Joy and gladness burst forth throughout the castle. The wedding was celebrated, and he was crowned king of the Golden Mountain. They lived together very happily, and the queen had a son. And thus 8 years had passed over their heads when the king thought of his father, and he began to long to see him once again. But the queen was against his going, and said, I know well that misfortunes will come upon us if you go. However, he gave her no rest till she agreed. At his going away she gave him a wishing ring, and said, Take this ring, and put it on your finger, whatever you wish it will bring you, only promise never to make use of it to bring me hence to your father's house. Then he said he would do what she asked, and put the ring on his finger, and wished himself near the town where his father lived. Heinel found himself at the gates in a moment, but the guards would not let him go in, because he was so strangely clad. So he went up to a neighboring hill, where a shepherd dwelt, and borrowed his old frock, and thus passed unknown into the town. When he came to his father's house, he said he was his son, but the merchant would not believe him, and said he had had but one son, his poor Heinel, who he knew was long since dead, and as he was only dressed like a poor shepherd, he would not even give him anything to eat. The king, however, still vowed that he was his son, and said, Is there no mark by which you would know me, if I am really your son? Yes, said his mother, our Heinel had a mark like a raspberry on his right arm. Then he showed them the mark, and they knew that what he had said was true. He next told them how he was king of the Golden Mountain, and was married to a princess, and had a son 7 years old. But the merchant said, That can never be true, he must be a fine king truly who travels about in a shepherd's frock. At this the son was vexed, and forgetting his word, turned his ring, and wished for his queen and son. In an instant they stood before him, but the queen wept, and said he had broken his word, and bad luck would follow. He did all he could to soothe her, and she at last seemed to be appeased, but she was not so in truth, and was only thinking how she should punish him. One day he took her to walk with him out of the town, and showed her the spot where the boat was set adrift upon the wide waters. Then he sat himself down, and said, I am very much tired, sit by me, I will rest my head in your lap, and sleep a while. As soon as he had fallen asleep, however, she drew the ring from his finger, and crept softly away, and wished herself and her son at home in their kingdom. And when he awoke, he found himself alone, and saw that the ring was gone from his finger. I can never go back to my father's house, said he, they would say I am a sorcerer, I will journey forth into the world, till I come again to my kingdom. So saying he set out and travelled till he came to a hill, where 3 giants were sharing their father's goods, and as they saw him pass they cried out and said, Little men have sharp wits, he shall part the goods between us. Now there was a sword that cut off an enemy's head whenever the wearer gave the words, heads off, a cloak that made the owner invisible, or gave him any form he pleased, and a pair of boots that carried the wearer wherever he wished. Heinel said they must first let him try these wonderful things, then he might know how to set a value upon them. Then they gave him the cloak, and he wished himself a fly. And in a moment he was a fly. The cloak is very well, said he, now give me the sword. No, said they, not unless you undertake not to say, heads off, for if you do we are all dead men. So they gave it him, charging him to try it on a tree. He next asked for the boots also. And the moment he had all 3 in his power, he wished himself at the Golden Mountain, and there he was at once. So the giants were left behind with no goods to share or quarrel about. As Heinel came near his castle he heard the sound of merry music, and the people around told him that his queen was about to marry another husband. Then he threw his cloak around him, and passed through the castle hall, and placed himself by the side of the queen, where no one saw him. But when anything to eat was put upon her plate, he took it away and ate it himself, and when a glass of wine was handed to her, he took it and drank it, and thus, though they kept on giving her meat and drink, her plate and cup were always empty. Upon this, fear and remorse came over her, and she went into her chamber alone, and sat there weeping, and he followed her there. Alas, said she to herself, was I not once set free? Why then does this enchantment still seem to bind me? False and fickle one, said he. One indeed came who set thee free, and he is now near thee again, but how have you used him? Ought he to have had such treatment from thee? Then he went out and sent away the company, and said the wedding was at an end, for that he was come back to the kingdom. But the princes, peers, and great men mocked at him. However, he would enter into no parley with them, but only asked them if they would go in peace or not. Then they turned upon him and tried to seize him, but he drew his sword. Heads off, cried he, and with the word the traitors' heads fell before him, and Heinel was once more king of the Golden Mountain. There was once upon a time a poor peasant called Crab who drove with 2 oxen a load of wood to the town, and sold it to a doctor for 2 thalers. When the money was being counted out to him, it so happened that the doctor was sitting at table, and when the peasant saw how well he ate and drank, his heart desired what he saw, and would willingly have been a doctor too. So he remained standing a while, and at length inquired if he too could not be a doctor. Oh, yes, said the doctor. That is soon managed. What must I do? Asked the peasant. In the first place, buy yourself an ABC book of the kind which has a cock on the frontispiece. In the second, turn your cart and your 2 oxen into money, and get yourself some clothes, and whatsoever else pertains to medicine. Thirdly, have a sign painted for yourself with the words, I am Dr. Know-all, and have that nailed up above your house door. The peasant did everything that he had been told to do. When he had doctored people a while, but not long, a rich and great lord had some money stolen. Then he was told about Dr. Know-all, who lived in such and such a village, and must know what had become of the money. So the lord had the horses harnessed to his carriage, drove out to the village, and asked Crab if he were Dr. Know-all. Yes, he was, he said. Then he was to go with him and bring back the stolen money. Oh, yes, but Greta, my wife, must go too. The lord was willing, and let both of them have a seat in the carriage, and they all drove away together. When they came to the nobleman's castle, the table was spread, and Crab was told to sit down and eat. Yes, but my wife, Greta, too, said he, and he seated himself with her at the table. And when the first servant came with a dish of delicate fare, the peasant nudged his wife, and said, Greta. That was the first, meaning that was the servant who brought the first dish. The servant, however, thought he intended by that to say, that is, the first thief, and as he actually was so, he was terrified, and said to his comrade outside, the doctor knows all, we shall fare ill. He said I was the first. The second did not want to go in at all, but was forced. So when he went in with his dish, the peasant nudged his wife and said, Greta, that is the second. This servant was equally alarmed, and he got out as fast as he could. The third fared no better, for the peasant again said, Greta, that is the third. The fourth had to carry in a dish that was covered, and the lord told the doctor that he was to show his skill, and guess what was beneath the cover. Actually, there were crabs. The doctor looked at the dish, had no idea what to say, and cried, Ah, poor crab. When the lord heard that, he cried, There. He knows it, he must also know who has the money. On this the servants looked terribly uneasy, and made a sign to the doctor that they wished him to step outside for a moment. When therefore he went out, all four of them confessed to him that they had stolen the money, and said that they would willingly restore it and give him a heavy sum into the bargain if he would not denounce them, for if he did they would be hanged. They led him to the spot where the money was concealed. With this the doctor was satisfied, and returned to the hall, sat down to the table, and said, "My lord, now will I search in my book where the gold is hidden." The fifth servant, however, crept into the stove to hear if the doctor knew still more. But the doctor sat still, and opened his ABC book, turned the pages backwards and forwards, and looked for the cock. As he could not find it immediately, he said, "I know you are there, so you had better come out." Then the fellow in the stove thought that the doctor meant him, and full of terror, sprang out, crying, "That man knows everything." Then Dr. Know-all showed the lord where the money was, but did not say who had stolen it, and received from both sides much money in reward, and became a renowned man. There was once a man who had 7 sons, and last of all 1 daughter. Although the little girl was very pretty, she was so weak and small that they thought she could not live, but they said she should at once be christened. So the father sent one of his sons in haste to the spring to get some water, but the other 6 ran with him. Each wanted to be first at drawing the water, and so they were in such a hurry that all let their pitchers fall into the well, and they stood very foolishly looking at one another, and did not know what to do, for none dared go home. In the meantime the father was uneasy, and could not tell what made the young men stay so long. "Surely," said he, "the whole 7 must have forgotten themselves over some game of play," and when he had waited still longer and they yet did not come, he flew into a rage and wished them all turned into ravens. Scarcely had he spoken these words when he heard a croaking over his head, and looked up and saw 7 ravens as black as coal flying round and round. Sorry as he was to see his wish so fulfilled, he did not know how what was done could be undone, and comforted himself as well as he could for the loss of his 7 sons. With his dear little daughter, who soon became stronger and every day more beautiful. For a long time she did not know that she had ever had any brothers, for her father and mother took care not to speak of them before her, but one day by chance she heard the people about her speak of them. "Yes," said they, "she is beautiful indeed, but still 'tis a pity that her brothers should have been lost for her sake." Then she was much grieved, and went to her father and mother, and asked if she had any brothers, and what had become of them. So they dared no longer hide the truth from her, but said it was the will of heaven, and that her birth was only the innocent cause of it. But the little girl mourned sadly about it every day, and thought herself bound to do all she could to bring her brothers back. And she had neither rest nor ease, till at length one day she stole away, and set out into the wide world to find her brothers, wherever they might be, and free them, whatever it might cost her. She took nothing with her but a little ring which her father and mother had given her, a loaf of bread in case she should be hungry, a little pitcher of water in case she should be thirsty, and a little stool to rest upon when she should be weary. Thus she went on, and journeyed till she came to the world's end. Then she came to the sun. But the sun looked much too hot and fiery, so she ran away quickly to the moon, but the moon was cold and chilly, and said, "I smell flesh and blood this way," so she took herself away in a hurry and came to the stars, and the stars were friendly and kind to her, and each star sat upon his own little stool. But the morning star rose up and gave her a little piece of wood, and said, "If you have not this little piece of wood, you cannot unlock the castle that stands on the glass mountain. And there your brothers live." The little girl took the piece of wood, rolled it up in a little cloth, and went on again until she came to the glass mountain, and found the door shut. Then she felt for the little piece of wood, but when she unwrapped the cloth it was not there, and she saw she had lost the gift of the good stars. What was to be done? She wanted to save her brothers, and had no key of the castle of the glass mountain, so this faithful little sister took a knife out of her pocket and cut off her little finger, that was just the size of the piece of wood she had lost, and put it in the door and opened it. As she went in, a little dwarf came up to her, and said, "What are you seeking for?" "I seek for my brothers, the 7 ravens," answered she. Then the dwarf said, "My masters are not at home, but if you will wait till they come, pray step in." Now the little dwarf was getting their dinner ready, and he brought their food upon 7 little plates, and their drink in 7 little glasses, and set them upon the table, and out of each little plate their sister ate a small piece, and out of each little glass she drank a small drop, but she let the ring that she had brought with her fall into the last glass. On a sudden she heard a fluttering and croaking in the air, and the dwarf said, "Here come my masters." When they came in, they wanted to eat and drink, and looked for their little plates and glasses. Then said, one after the other, "Who has eaten from my little plate? And who has been drinking out of my little glass?" "Caw, caw. Well, I ween mortal lips have this way been." When the 7th came to the bottom of his glass, and found there the ring, he looked at it, and knew that it was his father's and mother's, and said, "Oh, that our little sister would but come! Then we should be free." When the little girl heard this, for she stood behind the door all the time and listened, she ran forward, and in an instant all the ravens took their right form again, and all hugged and kissed each other, and went merrily home. First story. There was once upon a time an old fox with 9 tails, who believed that his wife was not faithful to him, and wished to put her to the test. He stretched himself out under the bench, did not move a limb, and behaved as if he were stone dead. Mrs. Fox went up to her room, shut herself in, and her maid, Miss Cat, sat by the fire, and did the cooking. When it became known that the old fox was dead, suitors presented themselves. The maid heard someone standing at the house door, knocking. She went and opened it, and it was a young fox, who said, "What may you be about, Miss Cat? Do you sleep or do you wake?" She answered, "I am not sleeping, I am waking. Would you know what I am making? I am boiling warm beer with butter. Will you be my guest for supper?" "No, thank you, miss," said the fox. "What is Mrs. Fox doing?" The maid replied, "She is sitting in her room, moaning in her gloom, weeping her little eyes quite red, because old Mr. Fox is dead. Do just tell her, miss, that a young fox is here, who would like to woo her." "Certainly, young sir." The cat goes up the stairs trip, trap. The door she knocks at tap, tap, tap. "Mistress Fox, are you inside?" "Oh, yes, my little cat," she cried. "A wooer he stands at the door out there." "What does he look like, my dear? Has he 9 as beautiful tails as the late Mr. Fox?" "Oh, no," answered the cat, "he has only 1. "Then I will not have him." Miss Cat went downstairs and sent the wooer away. Soon afterwards there was another knock, and another fox was at the door who wished to woo Mrs. Fox. He had 2 tails, but he did not fare better than the first. After this still more came, each with 1 tail more than the other, but they were all turned away, until at last one came who had 9 tails, like old Mr. Fox. When the widow heard that, she said joyfully to the cat, "Now open the gates and doors all wide, and carry old Mr. Fox outside." But just as the wedding was going to be solemnized, old Mr. Fox stirred under the bench, and cudgeled all the rabble, and drove them and Mrs. Fox out of the house. When old Mr. Fox was dead, the wolf came as a suitor, and knocked at the door, and the cat who was servant to Mrs. Fox opened it for him. The wolf greeted her, and said, "Good day, Mrs. Cat of Carewit. How comes it that alone you sit? What are you making good?" The cat replied, "In milk I'm breaking bread so sweet. Will you be my guest, and eat?" "No, thank you, Mrs. Cat," answered the wolf. "Is Mrs. Fox not at home?" The cat said, "She sits upstairs in her room, bewailing her sorrowful doom, bewailing her trouble so sore, for old Mr. Fox is no more." The wolf answered, "If she's in want of a husband now, then will it please her to step below?" The cat runs quickly up the stair, and lets her tail fly here and there, until she comes to the parlor door. With her 5 gold rings at the door she knocks. "Are you within, good Mistress Fox? If you're in want of a husband now, then will it please you to step below?" Mrs. Fox asked, "Has the gentleman red stockings on, and has he a pointed mouth?" "No," answered the cat. "Then he won't do for me." When the wolf was gone, came a dog, a stag, a hare, a bear, a lion, and all the beasts of the forest, one after the other. But one of the good qualities which old Mr. Fox had possessed, was always lacking, and the cat had continually to send the suitors away. At length came a young fox. Then Mrs. Fox said, "Has the gentleman red stockings on, and has a little pointed mouth?" "Yes," said the cat, "he has." "Then let him come upstairs," said Mrs. Fox, and ordered the servant to prepare the wedding feast. "Sweep me the room as clean as you can. Up with the window, fling out my old man. For many a fine fat mouse he brought. Yet of his wife he never thought, but ate up every one he caught." Then the wedding was solemnized with young Mr. Fox, and there was much rejoicing and dancing, and if they have not left off, they are dancing still. The salad. As a merry young huntsman was once going briskly along through a wood, there came up a little old woman, and said to him, "Good day, good day. You seem merry enough, but I am hungry and thirsty, do pray give me something to eat." The huntsman took pity on her, and put his hand in his pocket and gave her what he had. Then he wanted to go his way, but she took hold of him, and said, "Listen, my friend, to what I am going to tell you. I will reward you for your kindness, go your way, and after a little time you will come to a tree where you will see 9 birds sitting on a cloak. Shoot into the midst of them, and one will fall down dead, the cloak will fall too, take it, it is a wishing cloak, and when you wear it you will find yourself at any place where you may wish to be. Cut open the dead bird, take out its heart and keep it, and you will find a piece of gold under your pillow every morning when you rise. It is the bird's heart that will bring you this good luck." The huntsman thanked her, and thought to himself, "If all this does happen, it will be a fine thing for me." When he had gone 100 steps or so, he heard a screaming and chirping in the branches over him, and looked up and saw a flock of birds pulling a cloak with their bills and feet, screaming, fighting, and tugging at each other as if each wished to have it himself. "Well," said the huntsman, "this is wonderful, this happens just as the old woman said." Then he shot into the midst of them so that their feathers flew all about. Off went the flock chattering away, but one fell down dead, and the cloak with it. Then the huntsman did as the old woman told him, cut open the bird, took out the heart, and carried the cloak home with him. The next morning when he awoke he lifted up his pillow, and there lay the piece of gold glittering underneath. The same happened next day, and indeed every day when he arose, he heaped up a great deal of gold, and at last thought to himself, of what use is this gold to me whilst I am at home? I will go out into the world and look about me. Then he took leave of his friends, and hung his bag and bow about his neck, and went his way. It so happened that his road one day led through a thick wood, at the end of which was a large castle in a green meadow. And at one of the windows stood an old woman with a very beautiful young lady by her side looking about them. Now the old woman was a witch, and said to the young lady, "There is a young man coming out of the wood who carries a wonderful prize. We must get it away from him, my dear child. For it is more fit for us than for him. He has a bird's heart that brings a piece of gold under his pillow every morning." Meantime the huntsman came nearer and looked at the lady, and said to himself, "I have been traveling so long that I should like to go into this castle and rest myself, for I have money enough to pay for anything I want." But the real reason was, that he wanted to see more of the beautiful lady. Then he went into the house, and was welcomed kindly, and it was not long before he was so much in love that he thought of nothing else but looking at the lady's eyes, and doing everything that she wished. Then the old woman said, "Now is the time for getting the bird's heart." So the lady stole it away, and he never found any more gold under his pillow, for it lay now under the young lady's, and the old woman took it away every morning, but he was so much in love that he never missed his prize. "Well," said the old witch, "we have got the bird's heart, but not the wishing cloak yet, and that we must also get." "Let us leave him that," said the young lady, "he has already lost his wealth." Then the witch was very angry, and said, "Such a cloak is a very rare and wonderful thing, and I must and will have it." So she did as the old woman told her, and set herself at the window, and looked about the country and seemed very sorrowful. Then the huntsman said, "What makes you so sad?" "Alas, dear sir," said she, "yonder lies the granite rock where all the costly diamonds grow, and I want so much to go there, that whenever I think of it I cannot help being sorrowful, for who can reach it? Only the birds and the flies, man cannot." "If that's all your grief," said the huntsman, "I'll take you there with all my heart." So he drew her under his cloak, and the moment he wished to be on the granite mountain they were both there. The diamonds glittered so on all sides that they were delighted with the sight and picked up the finest. But the old witch made a deep sleep come upon him, and he said to the young lady, "Let us sit down and rest ourselves a little. I am so tired that I cannot stand any longer." So they sat down, and he laid his head in her lap and fell asleep, and whilst he was sleeping on she took the cloak from his shoulders, hung it on her own, picked up the diamonds, and wished herself home again. When he awoke and found that his lady had tricked him, and left him alone on the wild rock, he said, "Alas, what roguery there is in the world," and there he sat in great grief and fear, not knowing what to do. Now this rock belonged to fierce giants who lived upon it, and as he saw 3 of them striding about, he thought to himself, "I can only save myself by feigning to be asleep." So he laid himself down as if he were in a sound sleep. When the giants came up to him, the first pushed him with his foot, and said, "What worm is this that lies here curled up?" "Tread upon him and kill him," said the second. "It's not worth the trouble," said the third. "Let him live, he'll go climbing higher up the mountain, and some cloud will come rolling and carry him away." And they passed on. But the huntsman had heard all they said, and as soon as they were gone, he climbed to the top of the mountain, and when he had sat there a short time a cloud came rolling around him, and caught him in a whirlwind and bore him along for some time, till it settled in a garden. And he fell quite gently to the ground amongst the greens and cabbages. Then he looked around him, and said, "I wish I had something to eat, if not I shall be worse off than before," for here I see neither apples, nor pears, nor any kind of fruits, nothing but vegetables. At last he thought to himself, I can eat salad, it will refresh and strengthen me. So he picked out a fine head and ate of it, but scarcely had he swallowed 2 bites when he felt himself quite changed, and saw with horror that he was turned into an ass. However, he still felt very hungry, and the salad tasted very nice, so he ate on till he came to another kind of salad, and scarcely had he tasted it when he felt another change come over him, and soon saw that he was lucky enough to have found his old shape again. Then he laid himself down and slept off a little of his weariness, and when he awoke the next morning he broke off a head both of the good and the bad salad, and thought to himself, this will help me to my fortune again, and enable me to pay off some folks for their treachery. So he went away to try and find the castle of his friends, and after wandering about a few days he luckily found it. Then he stained his face all over brown, so that even his mother would not have known him, and went into the castle and asked for a lodging. I am so tired, said he, that I can go no farther. Countryman, said the witch, who are you? And what is your business? I am, said he, a messenger sent by the king to find the finest salad that grows under the sun. I have been lucky enough to find it, and have brought it with me, but the heat of the sun scorches so that it begins to wither, and I don't know that I can carry it farther. When the witch and the young lady heard of his beautiful salad, they longed to taste it, and said, Dear countryman, let us just taste it. To be sure, answered he, I have 2 heads of it with me, and will give you 1 foot, so he opened his bag and gave them the bad. Then the witch herself took it into the kitchen to be dressed, and when it was ready she could not wait till it was carried up, but took a few leaves immediately and put them in her mouth, and scarcely were they swallowed when she lost her own form and ran braying down into the court in the form of an ass. Now the servant maid came into the kitchen, and seeing the salad ready, was going to carry it up, but on the way she too felt a wish to taste it as the old woman had done, and ate some leaves, so she also was turned into an ass and ran after the other, letting the dish with the salad fall on the ground. The messenger sat all this time with the beautiful young lady, and as nobody came with the salad and she longed to taste it, she said, I don't know where the salad can be. Then he thought something must have happened, and said, I will go into the kitchen and see. And as he went he saw 2 asses in the court running about, and the salad lying on the ground. All right, said he, those 2 have had their share. Then he took up the rest of the leaves, laid them on the dish and brought them to the young lady, saying, I bring you the dish myself that you may not wait any longer. So she ate of it, and like the others ran off into the court braying away. Then the huntsman washed his face and went into the court that they might know him. Now you shall be paid for your roguery, said he, and tied them all 3 to a rope and took them along with him till he came to a mill and knocked at the window. What's the matter, said the miller. I have 3 tiresome beasts here, said the other, if you will take them, give them food and room, and treat them as I tell you, I will pay you whatever you ask. With all my heart, said the miller. But how shall I treat them? Then the huntsman said, Give the old one stripes 3 times a day and hay once, give the next, who was the servant maid, stripes once a day and hay 3 times, and give the youngest, who was the beautiful lady, hay 3 times a day and no stripes, for he could not find it in his heart to have her beaten. After this he went back to the castle, where he found everything he wanted. Some days after, the miller came to him and told him that the old ass was dead. The other 2, said he, are alive and eat, but are so sorrowful that they cannot last long. Then the huntsman pitied them and told the miller to drive them back to him, and when they came, he gave them some of the good salad to eat. And the beautiful young lady fell upon her knees before him, and said, "O dearest huntsman, forgive me all the ill I have done you. My mother forced me to it, it was against my will, for I always loved you very much. Your wishing cloak hangs up in the closet, and as for the bird's heart, I will give it you too." But he said, "Keep it, it will be just the same thing, for I mean to make you my wife." So they were married, and lived together very happily till they died. The story of the youth who went forth to learn what fear was. A certain father had 2 sons, the elder of who was smart and sensible, and could do everything, but the younger was stupid and could neither learn nor understand anything, and when people saw him they said, "There's a fellow who will give his father some trouble." When anything had to be done, it was always the elder who was forced to do it, but if his father bade him fetch anything when it was late, or in the night time, and the way led through the churchyard, or any other dismal place, he answered, "Oh, no father, I'll not go there, it makes me shudder," for he was afraid. Or when stories were told by the fire at night which made the flesh creep, the listeners sometimes said, "Oh, it makes us shudder." The younger sat in a corner and listened with the rest of them, and could not imagine what they could mean. They are always saying, "It makes me shudder, it makes me shudder." It does not make me shudder, thought he. That, too, must be an art of which I understand nothing. Now it came to pass that his father said to him one day, "Hearken to me, you fellow in the corner there, you are growing tall and strong, and you too must learn something by which you can earn your bread. Look how your brother works, but you do not even earn your salt." "Well, father," he replied, "I am quite willing to learn something indeed, if it could but be managed. I should like to learn how to shudder. I don't understand that at all yet." The elder brother smiled when he heard that, and thought to himself, "Goodness, what a blockhead that brother of mine is. He will never be good for anything as long as he lives. He who wants to be a sickle must bend himself betimes." The father sighed, and answered him, "You shall soon learn what it is to shudder, but you will not earn your bread by that." Soon after this the sexton came to the house on a visit, and the father bewailed his trouble, and told him how his younger son was so backward in every respect that he knew nothing and learnt nothing. "Just think," said he, "when I asked him how he was going to earn his bread, he actually wanted to learn to shudder." "If that be all," replied the sexton, "he can learn that with me. Send him to me, and I will soon polish him." The father was glad to do it, for he thought, "It will train the boy a little." The sexton therefore took him into his house, and he had to ring the church bell. After a day or two, the sexton awoke him at midnight, and bade him arise and go up into the church tower and ring the bell. "You shall soon learn what shuddering is," thought he, and secretly went there before him, and when the boy was at the top of the tower and turned round, and was just going to take hold of the bell rope, he saw a white figure standing on the stairs opposite the sounding hole. "Who is there?" cried he, but the figure made no reply, and did not move or stir. "Give an answer," cried the boy, "or take yourself off, you have no business here at night." The sexton, however, remained standing motionless that the boy might think he was a ghost. The boy cried a second time, "What do you want? Here, speak if you are an honest fellow, or I will throw you down the steps." The sexton thought, "He can't mean to be as bad as his words," uttered no sound and stood as if he were made of stone. Then the boy called to him for the 3rd time, and as that was also to no purpose, he ran against him and pushed the ghost down the stairs, so that it fell down the 10 steps and remained lying there in a corner. Thereupon he rang the bell, went home, and without saying a word went to bed, and fell asleep. The sexton's wife waited a long time for her husband, but he did not come back. At length she became uneasy, and wakened the boy, and asked, "Do you know where my husband is?" "He climbed up the tower." "Before you did?" "No, I don't know," replied the boy, "but someone was standing by the sounding hole on the other side of the steps, and as he would neither give an answer nor go away, I took him for a scoundrel and threw him downstairs. Just go there and you will see if it was he. I should be sorry if it were." The woman ran away and found her husband, who was lying moaning in the corner, and had broken his leg. She carried him down, and then with loud screams she hastened to the boy's father. "Your boy," cried she, "has been the cause of a great misfortune. He has thrown my husband down the steps so that he broke his leg. Take the good-for-nothing fellow out of our house." The father was terrified, and ran thither and scolded the boy. "What wicked tricks are these?" said he. "The devil must have put them into your head." "Father," he replied, "do listen to me. I am quite innocent. He was standing there by night like one intent on doing evil. I did not know who it was, and I entreated him 3 times either to speak or to go away." "Ah," said the father, "I have nothing but unhappiness with you. Go out of my sight. I will see you no more." "Yes, father, right willingly, wait only until it is day. Then will I go forth and learn how to shudder, and then I shall, at any rate, understand one art which will support me." "Learn what you will," spoke the father, "it is all the same to me. Here are $50 for you. Take these and go into the wide world, and tell no one from whence you come, and who is your father, for I have reason to be ashamed of you." "Yes, father, it shall be as you will. If you desire nothing more than that, I can easily keep it in mind." When the day dawned, therefore, the boy put his $50 into his pocket, and went forth on the great highway, and continually said to himself, "If I could but shudder! If I could but shudder!" Then a man approached who heard this conversation which the youth was holding with himself, and when they had walked a little farther to where they could see the gallows, the man said to him, "Look, there is the tree where 7 men have married the ropemaker's daughter, and are now learning how to fly. Sit down beneath it, and wait till night comes, and you will soon learn how to shudder." "If that is all that is wanted," answered the youth, "it is easily done, but if I learn how to shudder as fast as that, you shall have my $50. Just come back to me early in the morning." Then the youth went to the gallows, sat down beneath it, and waited till evening came. And as he was cold, he lighted himself a fire. But at midnight the wind blew so sharply that in spite of his fire, he could not get warm. And as the wind knocked the hanged men against each other, and they moved backwards and forwards, he thought to himself, "If you shiver below by the fire, how those up above must freeze and suffer." And as he felt pity for them, he raised the ladder, and climbed up, unbound one of them after the other, and brought down all 7. Then he stoked the fire, blew it, and set them all round it to warm themselves. But they sat there and did not stir, and the fire caught their clothes. So he said, "Take care, or I will hang you up again." The dead men, however, did not hear, but were quite silent, and let their rags go on burning. At this he grew angry, and said, "If you will not take care, I cannot help you, I will not be burnt with you," and he hung them up again each in his turn. Then he sat down by his fire and fell asleep, and the next morning the man came to him and wanted to have the $50, and said, "Well, do you know how to shudder?" "No," answered he. "How should I know? Those fellows up there did not open their mouths, and were so stupid that they let the few old rags which they had on their bodies get burnt. Then the man saw that he would not get the $50 that day, and went away saying, "Such a youth has never come my way before." The youth likewise went his way, and once more began to mutter to himself, "Ah, if I could but shudder! Ah, if I could but shudder!" A wagoner who was striding behind him heard this and asked, "Who are you?" "I don't know," answered the youth. Then the wagoner asked, "From whence do you come?" "I know not." "Who is your father?" "That I may not tell you." "What is it that you are always muttering between your teeth?" "Ah," replied the youth, "I do so wish I could shudder, but no one can teach me how." "Enough of your foolish chatter," said the wagoner. "Come, go with me, I will see about a place for you." The youth went with the wagoner, and in the evening they arrived at an inn, where they wished to pass the night. Then at the entrance of the parlor, the youth again said quite loudly, "If I could but shudder! If I could but shudder!" The host who heard this, laughed and said, "If that is your desire, there ought to be a good opportunity for you here." "Ah! Be silent," said the hostess, "so many prying persons have already lost their lives. It would be a pity and a shame if such beautiful eyes as these should never see the daylight again." But the youth said, "However difficult it may be, I will learn it. For this purpose indeed have I journeyed forth." He let the host have no rest, until the latter told him that not far from thence stood a haunted castle where anyone could very easily learn what shuddering was, if he would but watch in it for 3 nights. The king had promised that he who would venture should have his daughter to wife, and she was the most beautiful maiden the sun shone on. Likewise in the castle lay great treasures, which were guarded by evil spirits, and these treasures would then be freed, and would make a poor man rich enough. Already many men had gone into the castle, but as yet none had come out again. Then the youth went next morning to the king, and said, "If it be allowed, I will willingly watch 3 nights in the haunted castle." The king looked at him, and as the youth pleased him, he said, "You may ask for 3 things to take into the castle with you, but they must be things without life." Then he answered, "Then I ask for a fire, a turning lathe, and a cutting board with a knife." The king had these things carried into the castle for him during the day. When night was drawing near, the youth went up and made himself a bright fire in one of the rooms, placed the cutting board and knife beside it, and seated himself by the turning lathe. "Ah, if I could but shudder," said he, "but I shall not learn it here either." Towards midnight he was about to poke his fire, and as he was blowing it, something cried suddenly from one corner, "Oh, meow! How cold we are!" "You fools," cried he, "what are you crying about? If you are cold, come and take a seat by the fire and warm yourselves." And when he had said that, 2 great black cats came with one tremendous leap and sat down on each side of him, and looked savagely at him with their fiery eyes. After a short time, when they had warmed themselves, they said, "Comrade, shall we have a game of cards?" "Why not?" he replied, "but just show me your paws." Then they stretched out their claws. "Oh," said he, "what long nails you have! Wait, I must first cut them for you." Thereupon he seized them by the throats, put them on the cutting board, and screwed their feet fast. "I have looked at your fingers," said he, "and my fancy for card playing has gone," and he struck them dead and threw them out into the water. But when he had made away with these 2, and was about to sit down again by his fire, out from every hole and corner came black cats and black dogs with red-hot chains, and more of them came until he could no longer move, and they yelled horribly, and got on his fire, pulled it to pieces, and tried to put it out. He watched them for a while quietly, but at last when they were going too far, he seized his cutting knife, and cried, "Away with you, vermin," and began to cut them down. Some of them ran away, the others he killed, and threw out into the fish pond. When he came back he fanned the embers of his fire again and warmed himself. And as he thus sat, his eyes would keep open no longer, and he felt a desire to sleep. Then he looked round and saw a great bed in the corner. "That is the very thing for me," said he, and got into it. When he was just going to shut his eyes, however, the bed began to move of its own accord, and went over the whole of the castle. "That's right," said he, "but go faster." Then the bed rolled on as if 6 horses were harnessed to it, up and down, over thresholds and stairs, but suddenly hop, hop, it turned over upside down, and lay on him like a mountain. But he threw quilts and pillows up in the air, got out and said, "Now anyone who likes, may drive," and lay down by his fire, and slept till it was day. In the morning the king came, and when he saw him lying there on the ground, he thought the evil spirits had killed him and he was dead. Then said he, "After all it is a pity for so handsome a man." The youth heard it, got up, and said, "It has not come to that yet." Then the king was astonished, but very glad, and asked how he had fared. "Very well indeed," answered he, "one night is past, the 2 others will pass likewise." Then he went to the innkeeper, who opened his eyes very wide, and said, "I never expected to see you alive again. Have you learnt how to shudder yet?" "No," said he. "It is all in vain. If someone would but tell me." The second night he again went up into the old castle, sat down by the fire, and once more began his old song, "If I could but shudder." When midnight came, an uproar and noise of tumbling about was heard. At first it was low, but it grew louder and louder. Then it was quiet for a while, and at length with a loud scream, half a man came down the chimney and fell before him. "Hullo," cried he, "another half belongs to this. This is not enough." Then the uproar began again, there was a roaring and howling, and the other half fell down likewise. "Wait," said he, "I will just stoke up the fire a little for you." When he had done that and looked round again, the 2 pieces were joined together, and a hideous man was sitting in his place. "That is no part of our bargain," said the youth, "the bench is mine." The man wanted to push him away. The youth, however, would not allow that, but thrust him off with all his strength, and seated himself again in his own place. Then still more men fell down, one after the other. They brought 9 dead men's legs and 2 skulls, and set them up and played at 9 pins with them. The youth also wanted to play and said, "Listen you, can I join you?" "Yes, if you have any money." "Money enough," replied he, "but your balls are not quite round." Then he took the skulls and put them in the lathe and turned them till they were round. "There, now they will roll better," said he. "Hurrah! Now we'll have fun." He played with them and lost some of his money, but when it struck 12, everything vanished from his sight. He lay down and quietly fell asleep. Next morning the king came to inquire after him. "How has it fared with you this time?" asked he. "I have been playing at 9 pins," he answered, "and have lost a couple of farthings." "Have you not shuddered then?" "What," said he, "I have had a wonderful time. If I did but know what it was to shudder." The third night he sat down again on his bench and said quite sadly, "If I could but shudder." When it grew late, 6 tall men came in and brought a coffin. Then he said, "Ha, ha, that is certainly my little cousin who died only a few days ago, and he beckoned with his finger and cried, "Come, little cousin, come." They placed the coffin on the ground, but he went to it and took the lid off, and a dead man lay therein. He felt his face, but it was cold as ice. "Wait," said he, "I will warm you a little," and went to the fire and warmed his hand and laid it on the dead man's face, but he remained cold. Then he took him out, and sat down by the fire and laid him on his breast and rubbed his arms that the blood might circulate again. As this also did no good, he thought to himself, when two people lie in bed together, they warm each other, and carried him to the bed, covered him over and lay down by him. After a short time the dead man became warm too, and began to move. Then said the youth, "See, little cousin, have I not warmed you?" The dead man, however, got up and cried, "Now will I strangle you." "What," said he, "is that the way you thank me? You shall at once go into your coffin again," and he took him up, threw him into it, and shut the lid. Then came the 6 men and carried him away again. "I cannot manage to shudder," said he. "I shall never learn it here as long as I live." Then a man entered who was taller than all others, and looked terrible. He was old, however, and had a long white beard. "You wretch," cried he, "you shall soon learn what it is to shudder, for you shall die." "Not so fast," replied the youth. "If I am to die, I shall have to have a say in it." "I will soon seize you," said the fiend. "Softly, softly, do not talk so big. I am as strong as you are, and perhaps even stronger." "We shall see," said the old man. "If you are stronger, I will let you go. Come, we will try." Then he led him by dark passages to a smith's forge, took an axe, and with one blow struck an anvil into the ground. "I can do better than that," said the youth, and went to the other anvil. The old man placed himself near and wanted to look on, and his white beard hung down. Then the youth seized the axe, split the anvil with one blow, and in it caught the old man's beard. "Now I have you," said the youth. "Now it is your turn to die." Then he seized an iron bar and beat the old man till he moaned and entreated him to stop, when he would give him great riches. The youth drew out the axe and let him go. The old man led him back into the castle, and in a cellar showed him 3 chests full of gold. "Of these," said he, "one part is for the poor, the other for the king, the third yours." In the meantime it struck 12, and the spirit disappeared, so that the youth stood in darkness. "I shall still be able to find my way out," said he, and felt about, found the way into the room, and slept there by his fire. Next morning the king came and said, "Now you must have learnt what shuddering is?" "No," he answered, "what can it be?" "My dead cousin was here, and a bearded man came and showed me a great deal of money down below, but no one told me what it was to shudder." "Then," said the king, "you have saved the castle, and shall marry my daughter." "That is all very well," said he, "but still I do not know what it is to shudder." Then the gold was brought up and the wedding celebrated, but howsoever much the young king loved his wife, and however happy he was, he still said always, "If I could but shudder, if I could but shudder." And this at last angered her. Her waiting maid said, "I will find a cure for him. He shall soon learn what it is to shudder." She went out to the stream, which flowed through the garden, and had a whole bucket full of gudgeons brought to her. At night when the young king was sleeping, his wife was to draw the clothes off him and empty the bucket full of cold water, with the gudgeons in it over him, so that the little fishes would sprawl about him. Then he woke up and cried, "Oh, what makes me shudder so, what makes me shudder so, dear wife? Ah. Now I know what it is to shudder. A great king of a land far away in the east had a daughter who was very beautiful, but so proud, and haughty, and conceited, that none of the princes who came to ask her in marriage was good enough for her, and she only made sport of them. Once upon a time the king held a great feast, and asked thither all her suitors, and they all sat in a row, ranged according to their rank, kings, and princes, and dukes, and earls, and counts, and barons, and knights. Then the princess came in, and as she passed by them she had something spiteful to say to every one. The first was too fat, he's as round as a tub, said she. The next was too tall, what a maple, said she. The next was too short, what a dumpling, said she. The fourth was too pale, and she called him Wallface. The fifth was too red, so she called him Coxcomb. The sixth was not straight enough, so she said he was like a green stick that had been laid to dry over a baker's oven. And thus she had some joke to crack upon every one, but she laughed more than all at a good king who was there. Look at him, said she, his beard is like an old mop, he shall be called Grizzly Beard. So the king got the nickname of Grizzly Beard. But the old king was very angry when he saw how his daughter behaved, and how she ill-treated all his guests, and he vowed that, willing or unwilling, she should marry the first man, be he prince or beggar, that came to the door. 2 days after there came by a traveling fiddler, who began to play under the window and beg alms, and when the king heard him, he said, "Let him come in." So they brought in a dirty-looking fellow, and when he had sung before the king and the princess, he begged a boon. Then the king said, "You have sung so well, that I will give you my daughter for your wife." The princess begged and prayed, but the king said, "I have sworn to give you to the first comer, and I will keep my word." So words and tears were of no avail, the parson was sent for, and she was married to the fiddler. When this was over the king said, "Now get ready to go, you must not stay here, you must travel on with your husband." Then the fiddler went his way, and took her with him, and they soon came to a great wood. "Pray," said she, "whose is this wood?" "It belongs to King Grizzly Beard," answered he. "Hadst thou taken him, all had been thine." "Ah! Unlucky wretch that I am," sighed she, "would that I had married King Grizzly Beard." Next they came to some fine meadows. "Whose are these beautiful green meadows?" said she. "They belong to King Grizzly Beard. Hadst thou taken him, they had all been thine." "Ah! Unlucky wretch that I am," said she, "would that I had married King Grizzly Beard." Then they came to a great city. "Whose is this noble city?" said she. "It belongs to King Grizzly Beard. Hadst thou taken him, it had all been thine." "Ah! Wretch that I am," sighed she, "why did I not marry King Grizzly Beard?" "That is no business of mine," said the fiddler. "Why should you wish for another husband? Am not I good enough for you?" At last they came to a small cottage. "What a paltry place," said she. "To whom does that little dirty hole belong?" Then the fiddler said, "That is your and my house, where we are to live." "Where are your servants?" cried she. "What do we want with servants?" said he. "You must do for yourself whatever is to be done. Now make the fire, and put on water and cook my supper, for I am very tired." But the princess knew nothing of making fires and cooking, and the fiddler was forced to help her. When they had eaten a very scanty meal they went to bed, but the fiddler called her up very early in the morning to clean the house. Thus they lived for 2 days, and when they had eaten up all there was in the cottage, the man said, "Wife, we can't go on thus, spending money and earning nothing. You must learn to weave baskets." Then he went out and cut willows, and brought them home, and she began to weave, but it made her fingers very sore. "I see this work won't do," said he, "try and spin, perhaps you will do that better." So she sat down and tried to spin, but the threads cut her tender fingers till the blood ran. "See now," said the fiddler, "you are good for nothing, you can do no work. What a bargain I have got! However, I'll try and set up a trade in pots and pans, and you shall stand in the market and sell them." "Alas," sighed she, "if any of my father's court should pass by and see me standing in the market, how they will laugh at me." But her husband did not care for that, and said she must work, if she did not wish to die of hunger. At first the trade went well, for many people, seeing such a beautiful woman, went to buy her wares, and paid their money without thinking of taking away the goods. They lived on this as long as it lasted, and then her husband bought a fresh lot of ware, and she sat herself down with it in the corner of the market, but a drunken soldier soon came by, and rode his horse against her stall, and broke all her goods into 1,000 pieces. Then she began to cry, and knew not what to do. "Ah! What will become of me?" said she. "What will my husband say?" So she ran home and told him all. "Who would have thought you would have been so silly," said he, "as to put an earthenware stall in the corner of the market, where everybody passes? But let us have no more crying, I see you are not fit for this sort of work." So I have been to the king's palace, and asked if they did not want a kitchen maid, and they say they will take you, and there you will have plenty to eat. Thus the princess became a kitchen maid, and helped the cook to do all the dirtiest work, but she was allowed to carry home some of the meat that was left, and on this they lived. She had not been there long before she heard that the king's eldest son was passing by, going to be married, and she went to one of the windows and looked out. Everything was ready, and all the pomp and brightness of the court was there. Then she bitterly grieved for the pride and folly which had brought her so low. And the servants gave her some of the rich meats, which she put into her basket to take home. All on a sudden, as she was going out, in came the king's son in golden clothes, and when he saw a beautiful woman at the door, he took her by the hand, and said she should be his partner in the dance, but she trembled for fear, for she saw that it was King Grizzlybeard, who was making sport of her. However, he kept fast hold, and let her in, and the cover of the basket came off, so that the meats in it fell about. Then everybody laughed and jeered at her, and she was so abashed, that she wished herself 1,000 feet deep in the earth. She sprang to the door to run away, but on the steps King Grizzlybeard overtook her, and brought her back and said, "Fear me not. I am the fiddler who has lived with you in the hut. I brought you there because I really loved you. I am also the soldier that overset your stall. I have done all this only to cure you of your silly pride, and to show you the folly of your ill treatment of me. Now all is over, you have learnt wisdom, and it is time to hold our marriage feast." Then the chamberlains came and brought her the most beautiful robes, and her father and his whole court were there already, and welcomed her home. On her marriage, joy was in every face and every heart. The feast was grand, they danced and sang, all were merry, and I only wish that you and I had been of the party. Iron Hans. There was once upon a time a king who had a great forest near his palace, full of all kinds of wild animals. One day he sent out a huntsman to shoot him a roe, but he did not come back. "Perhaps some accident has befallen him," said the king, and the next day he sent out 2 more huntsmen who were to search for him, but they too stayed away. Then on the 3rd day, he sent for all his huntsmen, and said, "Scour the whole forest through, and do not give up until you have found all." 3. But of these also, none came home again, none were seen again. From that time forth, no one would any longer venture into the forest. And it lay there in deep stillness and solitude, and nothing was seen of it, but sometimes an eagle or a hawk flying over it. This lasted for many years, when an unknown huntsman announced himself to the king as seeking a situation, and offered to go into the dangerous forest. The king, however, would not give his consent, and said, "It is not safe in there, I fear it would fare with you no better than with the others. And you would never come out again." The huntsman replied, "Lord, I will venture it at my own risk, of fear I know nothing." The huntsman therefore betook himself with his dog to the forest. It was not long before the dog fell in with some game on the way, and wanted to pursue it, but hardly had the dog run 2 steps when it stood before a deep pool, could go no farther, and a naked arm stretched itself out of the water, seized it, and drew it under. When the huntsman saw that, he went back and fetched 3 men to come with buckets and bail out the water. When they could see to the bottom, there lay a wild man whose body was brown like rusty iron, and whose hair hung over his face down to his knees. They bound him with cords, and led him away to the castle. There was great astonishment over the wild man. The king, however, had him put in an iron cage in his courtyard, and forbade the door to be opened on pain of death, and the queen herself was to take the key into her keeping. And from this time forth everyone could again go into the forest with safety. The king had a son of 8 years, who was once playing in the courtyard, and while he was playing, his golden ball fell into the cage. The boy ran thither and said, "Give me my ball out." "Not till you have opened the door for me," answered the man. "No," said the boy, "I will not do that, the king has forbidden it," and ran away. The next day he again went and asked for his ball. The wild man said, "Open my door." But the boy would not. On the 3rd day the king had ridden out hunting. And the boy went once more and said, "I cannot open the door even if I wished, for I have not the key." Then the wild man said, "It lies under your mother's pillow, you can get it there." The boy, who wanted to have his ball back, cast all thought to the winds, and brought the key. The door opened with difficulty, and the boy pinched his fingers. When it was open, the wild man stepped out, gave him the golden ball, and hurried away. The boy had become afraid. He called and cried after him, "Oh, wild man, do not go away, or I shall be beaten." The wild man turned back, took him up, set him on his shoulder, and went with hasty steps into the forest. When the king came home, he observed the empty cage, and asked the queen how that had happened. She knew nothing about it, and sought the key, but it was gone. She called the boy, but no one answered. The king sent out people to seek for him in the fields, but they did not find him. Then he could easily guess what had happened, and much grief reigned in the royal court. When the wild man had once more reached the dark forest, he took the boy down from his shoulder, and said to him, "You will never see your father and mother again, but I will keep you with me, for you have set me free. And I have compassion on you. If you do all I bid you, you shall fare well. Of treasure and gold have I enough, and more than anyone in the world." He made a bed of moss for the boy on which he slept, and the next morning the man took him to a well, and said, "Behold, the gold well is as bright and clear as crystal. You shall sit beside it, and take care that nothing falls into it, or it will be polluted. I will come every evening to see if you have obeyed my order." The boy placed himself by the brink of the well, and often saw a golden fish or a golden snake show itself therein, and took care that nothing fell in. As he was thus sitting, his finger hurt him so violently that he involuntarily put it in the water. He drew it quickly out again, but saw that it was quite gilded, and whatsoever pains he took to wash the gold off again, all was to no purpose. In the evening Iron Hans came back, looked at the boy, and said, "What has happened to the well?" "Nothing. Nothing," he answered, and held his finger behind his back, that the man might not see it. But he said, "You have dipped your finger into the water, this time it may pass, but take care you do not again let anything go in." By daybreak the boy was already sitting by the well and watching it. His finger hurt him again and he passed it over his head. And then unhappily a hair fell down into the well. He took it quickly out, but it was already quite gilded. Iron Hans came, and already knew what had happened. "You have let a hair fall into the well," said he. "I will allow you to watch by it once more, but if this happens for the third time then the well is polluted and you can no longer remain with me." On the third day, the boy sat by the well, and did not stir his finger, however much it hurt him. But the time was long to him, and he looked at the reflection of his face on the surface of the water. And as he still bent down more and more while he was doing so, and trying to look straight into the eyes, his long hair fell down from his shoulders into the water. He raised himself up quickly, but the whole of the hair of his head was already golden and shone like the sun. You can imagine how terrified the poor boy was. He took his pocket handkerchief and tied it round his head, in order that the man might not see it. When he came he already knew everything, and said, "Take the handkerchief off." Then the golden hair streamed forth, and let the boy excuse himself as he might, it was of no use. "You have not stood the trial and can stay here no longer. Go forth into the world, there you will learn what poverty is. But as you have not a bad heart, and as I mean well by you, there is one thing I will grant you: if you fall into any difficulty, come to the forest and cry, 'Iron Hans,' and then I will come and help you. My power is great, greater than you think, and I have gold and silver in abundance." Then the king's son left the forest, and walked by beaten and unbeaten paths ever onwards until at length he reached a great city. There he looked for work, but could find none, and he learnt nothing by which he could help himself. At length he went to the palace, and asked if they would take him in. The people about court did not at all know what use they could make of him, but they liked him, and told him to stay. At length the cook took him into his service, and said he might carry wood and water, and rake the cinders together. Once when it so happened that no one else was at hand, the cook ordered him to carry the food to the royal table, but as he did not like to let his golden hair be seen, he kept his little cap on. Such a thing as that had never yet come under the king's notice, and he said, "When you come to the royal table you must take your hat off." He answered, "Ah, Lord, I cannot, I have a bad sore place on my head." Then the king had the cook called before him, and scolded him, and asked how he could take such a boy as that into his service, and that he was to send him away at once. The cook, however, had pity on him, and exchanged him for the gardener's boy. And now the boy had to plant and water the garden, hoe and dig, and bear the wind and bad weather. Once in summer when he was working alone in the garden, the day was so warm he took his little cap off that the air might cool him. As the sun shone on his hair it glittered and flashed so that the rays fell into the bedroom of the king's daughter, and up she sprang to see what that could be. Then she saw the boy, and cried to him, "Boy, bring me a wreath of flowers." He put his cap on with all haste, and gathered wild field flowers and bound them together. When he was ascending the stairs with them, the gardener met him, and said, "How can you take the king's daughter a garland of such common flowers? Go quickly, and get another, and seek out the prettiest and rarest." "Oh. No," replied the boy, "the wild ones have more scent, and will please her better." When he got into the room, the king's daughter said, "Take your cap off, it is not seemly to keep it on in my presence." He again said, "I may not, I have a sore head." She, however, caught at his cap and pulled it off, and then his golden hair rolled down on his shoulders, and it was splendid to behold. He wanted to run out, but she held him by the arm, and gave him a handful of ducats. With these he departed, but he cared nothing for the gold pieces. He took them to the gardener, and said, "I present them to your children, they can play with them." The following day the king's daughter again called to him that he was to bring her a wreath of field flowers, and then he went in with it. She instantly snatched at his cap, and wanted to take it away from him. But he held it fast with both hands. She again gave him a handful of ducats, but he would not keep them, and gave them to the gardener for playthings for his children. On the third day things went just the same, she could not get his cap away from him, and he would not have her money. Not long afterwards, the country was overrun by war. The king gathered together his people, and did not know whether or not he could offer any opposition to the enemy, who was superior in strength and had a mighty army. Then said the gardener's boy, "I am grown up, and will go to the wars also, only give me a horse." The others laughed, and said, "Seek one for yourself when we are gone, we will leave one behind us in the stable for you." When they had gone forth, he went into the stable, and led the horse out. It was lame of one foot, and limped hobblety-jib. Hobblety-jib, nevertheless he mounted it, and rode away to the dark forest. When he came to the outskirts, he called Iron Hans 3 times so loudly that it echoed through the trees. Thereupon the wild man appeared immediately, and said, "What do you desire?" "I want a strong steed, for I am going to the wars." "That you shall have, and still more than you ask for." Then the wild man went back into the forest, and it was not long before a stable boy came out of it, who led a horse that snorted with its nostrils, and could hardly be restrained, and behind them followed a great troop of warriors entirely equipped in iron, and their swords flashed in the sun. The youth made over his three-legged horse to the stable boy, mounted the other, and rode at the head of the soldiers. When he got near the battlefield, a great part of the king's men had already fallen, and little was wanting to make the rest give way. Then the youth galloped thither with his iron soldiers, broke like a hurricane over the enemy, and beat down all who opposed him. They began to flee, but the youth pursued, and never stopped, until there was not a single man left. Instead of returning to the king, however, he conducted his troop by byways back to the forest, and called forth Iron Hans. "What do you desire?" asked the wild man. "Take back your horse and your troops, and give me my three-legged horse again." All that he asked was done, and soon he was riding on his three-legged horse. When the king returned to his palace, his daughter went to meet him, and wished him joy of his victory. "I am not the one who carried away the victory," said he, "but a strange knight who came to my assistance with his soldiers." The daughter wanted to hear who the strange knight was. But the king did not know, and said, "He followed the enemy, and I did not see him again." She inquired of the gardener where his boy was, but he smiled, and said, "He has just come home on his three-legged horse. And the others have been mocking him, and crying, 'Here comes our hobblety-jib back again.'" They asked, too, "Under what hedge have you been lying sleeping all the time?" So he said, "I did the best of all. And it would have gone badly without me." And then he was still more ridiculed. The king said to his daughter, I will proclaim a great feast that shall last for 3 days, and you shall throw a golden apple. Perhaps the unknown man will show himself. When the feast was announced, the youth went out to the forest and called Iron Hans. What do you desire? Asked he. That I may catch the king's daughter's golden apple. It is as safe as if you had it already, said Iron Hans. You shall likewise have a suit of red armor for the occasion, and ride on a spirited chestnut horse. When the day came, the youth galloped to the spot, took his place amongst the knights, and was recognized by no one. The king's daughter came forward, and threw a golden apple to the knights, but none of them caught it but he. Only as soon as he had it he galloped away. On the second day Iron Hans equipped him as a white knight, and gave him a white horse. Again he was the only one who caught the apple, and he did not linger an instant, but galloped off with it. The king grew angry, and said, That is not allowed, he must appear before me and tell his name. He gave the order that if the knight who caught the apple should go away again they should pursue him, and if he would not come back willingly, they were to cut him down and stab him. On the third day, he received from Iron Hans a suit of black armor and a black horse, and again he caught the apple. But when he was riding off with it, the king's attendants pursued him, and one of them got so near him that he wounded the youth's leg with the point of his sword. The youth nevertheless escaped from them, but his horse leapt so violently that the helmet fell from the youth's head, and they could see that he had golden hair. They rode back and announced this to the king. The following day the king's daughter asked the gardener about his boy. He is at work in the garden, the queer creature has been at the festival too, and only came home yesterday evening. He has likewise shown my children 3 golden apples which he has won. The king had him summoned into his presence, and he came and again had his little cap on his head. But the king's daughter went up to him and took it off, and then his golden hair fell down over his shoulders, and he was so handsome that all were amazed. Are you the knight who came every day to the festival, always in different colors, and who caught the 3 golden apples? Asked the king. Yes, answered he, and here the apples are, and he took them out of his pocket, and returned them to the king. If you desire further proof, you may see the wound which your people gave me when they followed me. But I am likewise the knight who helped you to your victory over your enemies. If you can perform such deeds as that, you are no gardener's boy. Tell me, who is your father? My father is a mighty king, and gold have I in plenty as great as I require. I well see, said the king, that I owe my thanks to you. Can I do anything to please you? Yes, answered he, that indeed you can. Give me your daughter to wife. The maiden laughed, and said, He does not stand much on ceremony, but I have already seen by his golden hair that he was no gardener's boy, and then she went and kissed him. His father and mother came to the wedding, and were in great delight, for they had given up all hope of ever seeing their dear son again. And as they were sitting at the marriage feast, the music suddenly stopped, the doors opened, and a stately king came in with a great retinue. He went up to the youth, embraced him and said, I am Iron Hans, and was by enchantment a wild man, but you have set me free. All the treasures which I possess shall be your property. Catskin. There was once a king, whose queen had hair of the purest gold, and was so beautiful that her match was not to be met with on the whole face of the earth. But this beautiful queen fell ill, and when she felt that her end drew near she called the king to her and said, Promise me that you will never marry again unless you meet with a wife who is as beautiful as I am, and who has golden hair like mine. Then when the king in his grief promised all she asked, she shut her eyes and died. But the king was not to be comforted, and for a long time never thought of taking another wife. At last, however, his wise men said, "This will not do. The king must marry again, that we may have a queen." So messengers were sent far and wide, to seek for a bride as beautiful as the late queen. But there was no princess in the world so beautiful, and if there had been, still there was not one to be found who had golden hair. So the messengers came home, and had had all their trouble for nothing. Now the king had a daughter, who was just as beautiful as her mother, and had the same golden hair. And when she was grown up, the king looked at her and saw that she was just like this late queen. Then he said to his courtiers, "May I not marry my daughter? She is the very image of my dead wife. Unless I have her, I shall not find any bride upon the whole earth, and you say there must be a queen." When the courtiers heard this, they were shocked, and said, "Heaven forbid that a father should marry his daughter. Out of so great a sin no good can come." And his daughter was also shocked, but hoped the king would soon give up such thoughts. So she said to him, "Before I marry anyone I must have 3 dresses. One must be of gold, like the sun, another must be of shining silver, like the moon, and a third must be dazzling as the stars. Besides this, I want a mantle of 1,000 different kinds of fur put together, too, which every beast in the kingdom must give a part of his skin." And thus she thought he would think of the matter no more. But the king made the most skillful workmen in his kingdom weave the 3 dresses, one golden, like the sun, another silvery, like the moon, and a third sparkling, like the stars, and his hunters were told to hunt out all the beasts in his kingdom, and to take the finest fur out of their skins, and thus a mantle of 1,000 furs was made. When all were ready, the king sent them to her, but she got up in the night when all were asleep, and took 3 of her trinkets, a golden ring, a golden necklace, and a golden brooch, and packed the 3 dresses of the sun, the moon, and the stars up in a nutshell, and wrapped herself up in the mantle made of all sorts of fur, and besmeared her face and hands with soot. Then she threw herself upon heaven for help in her need, and went away, and journeyed on the whole night, till at last she came to a large wood. As she was very tired, she sat herself down in the hollow of a tree and soon fell asleep, and there she slept until it was midday. Now as the king to whom the wood belonged was hunting in it, his dogs came to the tree, and began to snuff about, and run round and round, and bark. "Look sharp," said the king to the huntsman, "and see what sort of game lies there." And the huntsman went up to the tree, and when they came back again said, "In the hollow tree there lies a most wonderful beast, such as we never saw before. Its skin seems to be of 1,000 kinds of fur, but there it lies fast asleep. See," said the king, "if you can catch it alive, and we will take it with us." So the huntsman took it up, and the maiden awoke and was greatly frightened, and said, "I am a poor child that has neither father nor mother left. Have pity on me and take me with you." Then they said, "Yes, Miss Catskin, you will do for the kitchen, you can sweep up the ashes, and do things of that sort." So they put her into the coach, and took her home to the king's palace. Then they showed her a little corner under the staircase, where no light of day ever peeped in, and said, "Catskin, you may lie and sleep there." And she was sent into the kitchen, and made to fetch wood and water, to blow the fire, pluck the poultry, pick the herbs, sift the ashes, and do all the dirty work. Thus Catskin lived for a long time very sorrowfully. "Ah, pretty princess," thought she, "what will now become of thee?" But it happened one day that a feast was to be held in the king's castle, so she said to the cook, "May I go up a little while and see what is going on?" "I will. Take care and stand behind the door." And the cook said, "Yes, you may. Go, but be back again in half an hour's time, to rake out the ashes." Then she took her little lamp, and went into her cabin, and took off the fur skin, and washed the soot from off her face and hands so that her beauty shone forth like the sun from behind the clouds. She next opened her nutshell, and brought out of it the dress that shone like the sun. And so went to the feast. Everyone made way for her, for nobody knew her, and they thought she could be no less than a king's daughter. But the king came up to her, and held out his hand and danced with her, and he thought in his heart, "I never saw anyone half so beautiful." When the dance was at an end she curtsied, and when the king looked round for her, she was gone, no one knew whither. The guards that stood at the castle gate were called in, but they had seen no one. The truth was, that she had run into her little cabin, pulled off her dress, blackened her face and hands, put on the furskin cloak, and was catskin again. When she went into the kitchen to her work, and began to rake the ashes, the cook said, "Let that alone till the morning, and heat the king's soup. I should like to run up now and give a peep, but take care you don't let a hair fall into it, or you will run a chance of never eating again." As soon as the cook went away, Catskin heated the king's soup, and toasted a slice of bread first, as nicely as ever she could, and when it was ready, she went and looked in the cabin for her little golden ring, and put it into the dish in which the soup was. When the dance was over, the king ordered his soup to be brought in, and it pleased him so well that he thought he had never tasted any so good before. At the bottom he saw a gold ring lying, and as he could not make out how it had got there, he ordered the cook to be sent for. The cook was frightened when he heard the order, and said to Catskin, "You must have let a hair fall into the soup. If it be so, you will have a good beating." Then he went before the king, and he asked him who had cooked the soup. "I did," answered the cook. But the king said, "That is not true, it was better done than you could do it." Then he answered, "To tell the truth, I did not cook it, but Catskin did." "Then let Catskin come up," said the king, and when she came he said to her, "Who are you?" "I am a poor child," said she, "that has lost both father and mother." "How came you in my palace?" asked he. "I am good for nothing," said she, "but to be scullion girl, and to have boots and shoes thrown at my head." "But how did you get the ring that was in the soup?" asked the king. Then she would not own that she knew anything about the ring, so the king sent her away again about her business. After a time there was another feast, and Catskin asked the cook to let her go up and see it as before. "Yes," said he, "but come again in half an hour, and cook the king the soup that he likes so much." Then she ran to her little cabin, washed herself quickly, and took her dress out which was silvery as the moon, and put it on, and when she went in looking like a king's daughter, the king went up to her, and rejoiced at seeing her again, and when the dance began he danced with her. After the dance was at an end she managed to slip out, so slyly that the king did not see where she was gone, but she sprang into her little cabin, and made herself into Catskin again, and went into the kitchen to cook the soup. Whilst the cook was above stairs, she got the golden necklace and dropped it into the soup, then it was brought to the king, who ate it. And it pleased him as well as before, so he sent for the cook, who was again forced to tell him that Catskin had cooked it. Catskin was brought again before the king, but she still told him that she was only fit to have boots and shoes thrown at her head. But when the king had ordered a feast to be got ready for the third time, it happened just the same as before. "You must be a witch, Catskin," said the cook, "for you always put something into your soup, so that it pleases the king better than mine." However, he let her go up as before. Then she put on her dress which sparkled like the stars, and went into the ballroom in it, and the king danced with her again, and thought she had never looked so beautiful as she did then. So whilst he was dancing with her, he put a gold ring on her finger without her seeing it, and ordered that the dance should be kept up a long time. When it was at an end, he would have held her fast by the hand, but she slipped away, and sprang so quickly through the crowd that he lost sight of her, and she ran as fast as she could into her little cabin under the stairs. But this time she kept away too long, and stayed beyond the half-hour, so she had not time to take off her fine dress, and threw her fur mantle over it, and in her haste did not blacken herself all over with soot, but left one of her fingers white. Then she ran into the kitchen, and cooked the king's soup, and as soon as the cook was gone, she put the golden brooch into the dish. When the king got to the bottom, he ordered Catskin to be called once more, and soon saw the white finger, and the ring that he had put on it whilst they were dancing, so he seized her hand, and kept fast hold of it, and when she wanted to loose herself and spring away, the fur cloak fell off a little on one side, and the starry dress sparkled underneath it. Then he got hold of the fur and tore it off, and her golden hair and beautiful form were seen, and she could no longer hide herself, so she washed the soot and ashes from her face, and showed herself to be the most beautiful princess upon the face of the earth. But the king said, "You are my beloved bride, and we will never more be parted from each other." And the wedding feast was held, and a merry day it was, as ever was heard of or seen in that country, or indeed in any other. There was once a poor widow who lived in a lonely cottage. In front of the cottage was a garden wherein stood 2 rose trees, one of which bore white and the other red roses. She had 2 children who were like the 2 rose trees, and one was called Snow White, and the other Rose Red. They were as good and happy, as busy and cheerful as ever 2 children in the world were, only Snow White was more quiet and gentle than Rose Red. Rose Red liked better to run about in the meadows and fields, seeking flowers and catching butterflies, but Snow White sat at home with her mother, and helped her with her housework, or read to her when there was nothing to do. The 2 children were so fond of one another that they always held each other by the hand when they went out together, and when Snow White said, "We will not leave each other," Rose Red answered, "Never so long as we live," and their mother would add, "What one has she must share with the other." They often ran about the forest alone and gathered red berries, and no beasts did them any harm, but came close to them trustfully. The little hare would eat a cabbage leaf out of their hands, the roe grazed by their side, the stag leapt merrily by them, and the birds sat still upon the boughs, and sang whatever they knew. No mishap overtook them. If they had stayed too late in the forest, and night came on, they laid themselves down near one another upon the moss, and slept until morning came, and their mother knew this and did not worry on their account. Once when they had spent the night in the wood and the dawn had roused them, they saw a beautiful child in a shining white dress sitting near their bed. He got up and looked quite kindly at them, but said nothing, and went into the forest. And when they looked round they found that they had been sleeping quite close to a precipice, and would certainly have fallen into it in the darkness if they had gone only a few paces further. And their mother told them that it must have been the angel who watches over good children. Snow White and Rose Red kept their mother's little cottage so neat that it was a pleasure to look inside it. In the summer Rose Red took care of the house, and every morning laid a wreath of flowers by her mother's bed before she awoke, in which was a rose from each tree. In the winter, Snow White lit the fire and hung the kettle on the hob. The kettle was of brass and shone like gold, so brightly was it polished. In the evening, when the snowflakes fell, the mother said, "Go, Snow White, and bolt the door, and then they sat round the hearth, and the mother took her spectacles and read aloud out of a large book, and the two girls listened as they sat and spun. And close by them lay a lamb upon the floor, and behind them upon a perch sat a white dove with its head hidden beneath its wings. One evening, as they were thus sitting comfortably together, someone knocked at the door as if he wished to be let in. The mother said, "Quick, Rose-Red, open the door, it must be a traveler who is seeking shelter." Rose-Red went and pushed back the bolt, thinking that it was a poor man, but it was not, it was a bear that stretched his broad, black head within the door. Rose-Red screamed and sprang back, the lamb bleated, the dove fluttered, and Snow-White hid herself behind her mother's bed. But the bear began to speak and said, "Do not be afraid, I will do you no harm. I am half frozen, and only want to warm myself a little beside you." "Poor bear," said the mother, "lie down by the fire, only take care that you do not burn your coat." Then she cried, "Snow-White, Rose-Red, come out, the bear will do you no harm, he means well." So they both came out, and by the lamb and dove came nearer, and were not afraid of him. The bear said, "Here, children, knock the snow out of my coat a little," so they brought the broom and swept the bear's hide clean. And he stretched himself by the fire and growled contentedly and comfortably. It was not long before they grew quite at home, and played tricks with their clumsy guest. They tugged his hair with their hands, put their feet upon his back and rolled him about, or they took a hazel switch and beat him, and when he growled they laughed. But the bear took it all in good part, only when they were too rough he called out, "Leave me alive, children. Snow-White, Rose-Red, will you beat your wooer dead?" When it was bedtime and the others went to bed, the mother said to the bear, "You can lie there by the hearth, and then you will be safe from the cold and the bad weather." As soon as day dawned the two children let him out, and he trotted across the snow into the forest. Henceforth the bear came every evening at the same time, laid himself down by the hearth, and let the children amuse themselves with him as much as they liked, and they got so used to him that the doors were never fastened until their black friend had arrived. When spring had come and all outside was green, the bear said one morning to Snow-White, "Now I must go away, and cannot come back for the whole summer." "Where are you going, then, dear bear?" asked Snow-White. "I must go into the forest and guard my treasures from the wicked dwarfs. In the winter, when the earth is frozen hard, they are obliged to stay below and cannot work their way through, but now, when the sun has thawed and warmed the earth, they break through it, and come out to pry and steal, and what once gets into their hands, and in their caves, does not easily see daylight again." Snow-White was quite sorry at his departure, and as she unbolted the door for him, and the bear was hurrying out, he caught against the bolt, and a piece of his hairy coat was torn off, and it seemed to Snow-White as if she had seen gold shining through it, but she was not sure about it. The bear ran away quickly, and was soon out of sight behind the trees. A short time afterwards the mother sent her children into the forest to get firewood. There they found a big tree which lay felled on the ground, and close by the trunk something was jumping backwards and forwards in the grass, but they could not make out what it was. When they came nearer they saw a dwarf with an old withered face and a snow-white beard a yard long. The end of the beard was caught in a crevice of the tree, and the little fellow was jumping about like a dog tied to a rope, and did not know what to do. He glared at the girls with his fiery red eyes and cried, "Why do you stand there? Can you not come here and help me? What are you up to, little man?" asked Rose-Red. "You stupid, prying goose," answered the dwarf, "I was going to split the tree to get a little wood for cooking. The little bit of food that we people get is immediately burned up with Heavy logs, we do not swallow so much as you coarse, greedy folk. I had just driven the wedge safely in, and everything was going as I wished. But the cursed wedge was too smooth and suddenly sprang out, and the tree closed so quickly that I could not pull out my beautiful white beard, so now it is tight and I cannot get away, and the silly, sleek, milk-faced things laugh. Ugh! How odious you are. The children tried very hard, but they could not pull the beard out, it was caught too fast. I will run and fetch someone, said Rose Red. You senseless goose, snarled the dwarf, why should you fetch someone? You are already too many for me, can you not think of something better? Don't be impatient, said Snow White, I will help you, and she pulled her scissors out of her pocket, and cut off the end of the beard. As soon as the dwarf felt himself free he laid hold of a bag which lay amongst the roots of the tree, and which was full of gold, and lifted it up, grumbling to himself, uncouth people, to cut off a piece of my fine beard. Bad luck to you, and then he swung the bag upon his back, and went off without even once looking at the children. Some time afterwards Snow White and Rose Red went to catch a dish of fish. As they came near the brook they saw something like a large grasshopper jumping towards the water, as if it were going to leap in. They ran to it and found it was the dwarf. Where are you going? Said Rose Red, you surely don't want to go into the water? I am not such a fool, cried the dwarf, don't you see that the accursed fish wants to pull me in? The little man had been sitting there fishing, and unluckily the wind had tangled up his beard with the fishing line. A moment later a big fish made a bite and the feeble creature had not strength to pull it out. The fish kept the upper hand and pulled the dwarf towards him. He held on to all the reeds and rushes, but it was of little good, for he was forced to follow the movements of the fish, and was in urgent danger of being dragged into the water. The girls came just in time, they held him fast and tried to free his beard from the line, but all in vain, beard and line were entangled fast together. There was nothing to do but to bring out the scissors and cut the beard, whereby a small part of it was lost. When the dwarf saw that, he screamed out, is that civil, you toadstool, to disfigure a man's face? Was it not enough to clip off the end of my beard? Now you have cut off the best part of it. I cannot let myself be seen by my people. I wish you had been made to run the soles off your shoes. Then he took out a sack of pearls which lay in the rushes, and without another word, he dragged it away and disappeared behind a stone. It happened that soon afterwards the mother sent the two children to the town to buy needles and thread, and laces and ribbons. The road led them across a heath upon which huge pieces of rock lay strewn about. There they noticed a large bird hovering in the air, flying slowly round and round above them. It sank lower and lower, and at last settled near a rock not far away. Immediately they heard a loud, piteous cry. They ran up and saw with horror that the eagle had seized their old acquaintance, the dwarf, and was going to carry him off. The children, full of pity, at once took tight hold of the little man, and pulled against the eagle so long that at last he let his booty go. As soon as the dwarf had recovered from his first fright he cried with his shrill voice, could you not have done it more carefully? You dragged at my brown coat so that it is all torn and full of holes, you clumsy creatures. Then he took up a sack full of precious stones, and slipped away again under the rock into his hole. The girls, who by this time were used to his ingratitude, went on their way and did their business in town. As they crossed the heath again on their way home they surprised the dwarf, who had emptied out his bag of precious stones in a clean spot, and had not thought that anyone would come there so late. The evening sun shone upon the brilliant stones, they glittered and sparkled with all colors so beautifully that the children stood still and stared. At them. "Why do you stand gaping there?" cried the dwarf, and his ashen-gray face became copper-red with rage. He was still cursing when a loud growling was heard, and a black bear came trotting towards them out of the forest. The dwarf sprang up in a fright, but he could not reach his cave, for the bear was already close. Then in the dread of his heart, he cried, "Dear Mr. Bear, spare me, I will give you all my treasures. Look, the beautiful jewels lying there. Grant me my life, what do you want with such a slender little fellow as I? You would not feel me between your teeth. Come, take these two wicked girls, they are tender morsels for you, fat as young quails, for mercy's sake eat them." The bear took no heed of his words, but gave the wicked creature a single blow with his paw, and he did not move again. The girls had run away, but the bear called to them, "Snow White and Rose Red, do not be afraid, wait, I will come with you." Then they recognized his voice and waited, and when he came up to them suddenly, his bearskin fell off, and he stood there a handsome man, clothed all in gold. "I am a king's son," he said, "and I was bewitched by that wicked dwarf, who had stolen my treasures. I have had to run about the forest as a savage bear until I was freed by his death. Now he has got his well-deserved punishment." Snow White was married to him, and Rose Red to his brother, and they divided between them the great treasure which the dwarf had gathered together in his cave. The old mother lived peacefully and happily with her children for many years. She took the two rose trees with her, and they stood before her window, and every year bore the most beautiful roses, white and red. The brothers Grimm, Jacob, 1785 to 1863, and Wilhelm, 1786 to 1859, were born in Hanau, near Frankfurt, in the German state of Hesse. Throughout their lives they remained close friends, and both studied law at Marburg University. Jacob was a pioneer in the study of German philology, and although Wilhelm's work was hampered by poor health, the brothers collaborated in the creation of a German dictionary, not completed until a century after their deaths. But they were best, and universally, known for the collection of over 200 folk tales they made from oral sources and published in 2 volumes of nursery and household tales in 1812 and 1814. Although their intention was to preserve such material as part of German cultural and literary history, and their collection was first published with scholarly notes and no illustration, the tales soon came into the possession of young readers. This was in part due to Edgar Taylor, who made the first English translation in 1823, selecting about 50 stories with the amusement of some young friends principally in view. They have been an essential ingredient of children's reading ever since.